Wait, why not just use Discord? I'm just curious.
Why
Oh, I wonder, Destiny.
Are you guys like banned from Discord or something?
No.
I
don't
gave
know
you a
why.
Discord
I
invite.
have once, yes. Currently, no.
Wait, did I say no to Discord?
Yes.
Wait, no, you're lying. You're lying.
I think it's all good. By the way, hello
You're
everybody
live,
on
by
my
the
side.
way.
Yeah. We're trying to like work out a couple of technical things mostly on our side. But
This stream is very professional.
But if you've been watching our streams for the last couple of months, it's always the height of professionalism. So, anywho, we're joined here today by Destiny to discuss, I think, just the Ukraine conflict in general. I don't know specifically what we're going to talk about, but I think I have a sort of opening statement, and I guess I don't know if you do, and want to. My basic premise before I get into it is that I don't think that the U.S. is not complicit in what's happening, and I don't think that I mean, obviously you have to condemn Russia, but I also think that it's unwise to not identify the role that the United States government has played both directly and indirectly in causing the circumstances that lead to the current conflict.
Okay. I mean, I think that Russia will do as Russia does. And I mean, I wouldn't put any blame on the West for anything that's going on, but obviously, I guess if I have a contradictory position, so yeah.
Right. That's where I figured it was. So just to reiterate, my problems and why I think the West is complicit are multifold and numerous. And I think if you go back to the history of Ukraine for the last 30 years, you'll find that, first of all, that the West and NATO have repeatedly, if not outright lied, have told sort of half-truths to Russia. And before it became Russia, to the USSR and specifically Gorbachev. They changed their tune regarding NATO between Gorbachev and Yeltsin, and then Putin has come in after that and is looking back and seeing his predecessors from his perspective. I'm not saying it's necessarily correct, but from his perspective and the Russian government perspective, seeing the US and NATO as having been disingenuous. And so then when you have the Euromaidan protest of 2014, and you have things like the late call between Victoria Nuland and Jeffrey Piat talking about regime change and who they would like to be in power in Ukraine, who ends up becoming in power in Ukraine, and other things like, of course, Joe Biden saying he was going to withhold a $1 billion deal if they didn't fire prosecutor Viktor Shokin, that it would look from the Russian perspective as if Ukraine is either a US puppet or at least is going to be in the control of NATO, which they see as a existential threat to their sovereignty.
Okay, I guess usually I like to go point by point, but we could run through all of it. So I don't agree about the idea that NATO is lying to Russia about expansion. There were talks between NATO and the Soviet Union in like 1990, I think in early 91, before the collapse of the Soviet Union, about like the militarization of East Germany. But this idea that there was some promise that NATO would never expand in the future, firstly, even if that promise was made, that was with a country that no longer existed. So call is nothing. Like, it's two people talking about like who they would prefer to see as a leader. I don't think it's weird that two ambassadors would have that conversation. Like, I'm pretty sure every single person around the world has had a conversation about who they would prefer to be the American president. That doesn't mean that there was a conspiracy to rig the election to choose an American president. I imagine that diplomatic people probably talk about preferences in leadership all the time. I don't think that makes for any conspiracy. The Biden thing gets a little hairy depending on how deep into that we want to go. That prosecutor that was fired was like hated across literally the entire Western world. And I'm pretty sure even in Ukraine, this wasn't like a unilateral decision by the United States to just kick out a prosecutor for no reason. I'm pretty sure almost everybody thought this dude was insanely corrupt. Ukraine as a country was insanely corrupt. But I don't know how far down the rabbit hole we want to go into that.
Sure. I mean, it seemed that he had maybe dropped the ball in the investigation into Zlochevsky.
I don't think it was just that one. I'm pretty sure that like his whole history of being like the big prosecutor in that country, like everybody thought that this guy was insanely corrupt.
But again, the problem is that there's a endemic problem with corruption across the Ukrainian government. So Shokin is maybe a symptom of a greater disease.
Sure.
But, as for I don't know where would be best to start then. Probably, I guess back with that original thing about the NATO expansion, just going in a historical timeline sort of way. So now the quote does talk about East Germany, but that idea that, and I've seen this kind of shared around now, that that Putin made up the not 1 inch east line, but that is in the declassified documents with James Baker. So the declassified United States documents between Baker and Gorbachev show that they did discuss NATO expansion and explicitly made that line about not 1 inch east. So
yeah, so there are declassified documents that talk about this. That line, that not 1 inch eastward line, was when Baker made the promise to Gorbachev that Eastern Germany, should reunification happen, that our military presence there wouldn't expand 1 inch eastward. That was initially what that was about. There have been 2 separate times afterwards where Gorbachev has been interviewed about that particular promise that was made. And and because people asked him, why didn't you get written on paper like assurances that NATO wouldn't expand ever? And he said, because that wasn't on the table at the time.
Yes,
and I think something that people forget is that, like, I don't even think that conversation would be on the table at the time, because the Warsaw Pact and the Soviet Union still existed. Where was NATO going to expand eastward to? Like, nobody knew that the Soviet Union was going to collapse as quickly as it did. Nobody saw that in 1 year it would be gone. So the idea that they would have been having a conversation saying, make sure these ex-Warsaw Pact countries that were still in the Warsaw Pact aren't going to join NATO, that would have never been like on the table at the time.
I'm not sure if that's accurate. I know the exact times you're talking about when Gorbachev's walked it back. And my contention on that is, again, these are the cable notes. They're recorded by United States officials. It's not, that part's not Russian disinformation. The classified documents. So if there is in the actual notes, it's saying not 1 inch east, and then Gorbachev chooses to remember it differently. I have two prongs to this. Gorbachev chooses to remember that differently 14 years later, which is when he made the statement that was never on the table, was 14 years after the fact. 1, he's older. 2, NATO did go east, obviously. So if you're a man whose crowning achievement of your life is more or less peacefully ending the Cold War, and along with that was sort of the promise that Russia would maintain its sovereignty, and then you have, from the Russian perspective, what appears to be encroaching forces from NATO, you might want to remember the past a little differently. And the other thing that you brought up about it not being the Soviet Union anymore, and then not potentially knowing, I'm not sure, because if that's the case, if Gorbachev at least wasn't aware that the Soviet Union was going to collapse in a year, certainly the average person probably didn't, but I think he may have been aware of that, being more or less the one in power, and that may have been why he was having these kinds of meetings with James Baker, of trying to secure his legacy and a future for not just Russia, but, and it is hard to tell how the states would have broken up. That's true, because, for example, the Ukraine SSR contains parts of it that were, Crimea in some descriptions is native Russian clay. There's also parts of it, Transcarpathia, that are part of historically Hungary and Bulgaria, and then there's parts of it that are historically part of Poland. So
I thought the conversations were happening because German reunification is what was on the line. That's what people were talking about. Gorbachev, nobody at the time, nobody knew that the USSR was 1 year from imminent collapse. I don't think anybody in the world could have seen that coming. It was like unprecedented. The idea that they would be so viciously fighting for some concept related to German reunification when the entire Soviet Union and Warsaw Pact was 1 year from collapse, I think is unfathomable. I don't think anybody saw that coming. But like, even if I would defend that position very strongly, but even if I wasn't to defend that position, even if I were to grant literally all of that, I would still say that it doesn't matter, because any agreement made about the state of European security with the Soviet Union is, especially a verbal promise, is going to be completely null and void given the collapse of the Soviet Union, because the state of European security is going to look fundamentally different post-collapse. Why would the United States or NATO restrict itself to a verbal promise made, not even like ratified, or not in any treaty, not in any memorandum, not in any accord? Why would we hold ourselves to that with post-collapse of the Soviet Union?
Legalistically, but that's what I was about to say.
Well, but it's not a show of good faith. It would be diplomatically, I'm trying to think of a smarter word than retarded, but it would be like diplomatically, it would be so stupid. Like, as a show of good faith, we're going to like completely. Well, what's not diplomatic is expecting like one of the superpowers of the world to have a private verbal agreement supposedly, and then expect that that's going to dictate the state of security for the next century. That would never be the case, right? You would always get something like this, even in an unenforceable fucking treaty or whatever. You would get this written down somewhere. Right? You would never rely on a verbal assurance like that for something as huge as this. That would be insane.
Well, a couple of things on that part then. I think part of that is I think you probably are correct that maybe that Gorbachev didn't know how fast things were going to change. So this probably had not been written down because it hadn't been formalized. The other part of it, though, is that legalistically, yeah, of course it's not binding. Legalistically, of course, it doesn't mean anything. However, I think that to break that verbal agreement with Gorbachev illustrates a betrayal of the trust with the Russian people. And when Bill Clinton is talking to Yeltsin a couple of years later, and he is saying to Yeltsin, very different from what was said to his predecessor in Gorbachev, and saying to Yeltsin, well, yes, NATO is going to expand, but it's going to be very slowly. And by the way, we want Russia's participation in the Partnership for Peace. We're going to work with Russia. We're not going to work with, you're not going to be excluded from NATO. And I think it's pretty clear that Russia's been excluded from NATO, not because they have not also done things to exclude themselves from it, to be fair. But I think when you look at it in that context, it explains why you now have someone like Putin, who does see NATO as an encroaching, expansionist, imperialistic force that is willing to break promises with Russia, even if it wasn't Russia at that time, the Russian SFSR, to be more clear. So if they're willing to break promises, even if it's a non-verbal agreement in 1991, why would they not break further agreements in the future?
I mean, it's just totally non-analogous or disanalogous. Like the idea that like you're willing to break supposedly a verbal promise made that's in dispute with a country that no longer exists. It just like, do we honor our agreements with like Prussia, or like how do people still treat, you know, like all of the Balkans or whatever is like Yugoslavia, or like it doesn't make any sense to me. That's unfathomable. If there was a verbal agreement, which even that is highly contentious, the idea that we would allow that verbal agreement to dictate everything going forward, I don't know. It just totally doesn't make any sense. I don't think that's the case. It's just
derailing the conversation a little bit. Spoon, people in our chat are saying that Aiden is quiet. I don't know about myself, but definitely you and Destiny are equalized. So please fix that. And to do a little bit of
I'll fix that. Hang on. I'll do it like him.
No, well, apologies. And to steer the conversation a little bit, the verbal agreements are mildly relevant because legally Russia is, I forget what term is, they're basically the same entity as the USSR.
It's the Russian
USSR
SFSR.
debts, all yes. Soviet debts have been paid by Russia. All other agreements made with the USSR have to be now honored with Russia. And legally speaking,
one reason it's nice to have Arthur on is Arthur's Russian, so he would know about some of this stuff. I wasn't actually aware of those specifics.
Sure, but I mean, even if it is the case that the nation of Russia inherited a lot from the USSR, there has never been a formal agreement in place, even an unenforceable one, saying that like NATO would never expand to encompass any Warsaw Pact countries or any other countries in Eastern Europe. That's just never been the case. So. To ensure the security of Europe. Well, right now from Russia, but more broadly speaking, from anybody. It's very hard to attack a NATO country because an Article 5 trigger is literally like hell raining down in your front yard.
Holocaust.
And it seems to be the case that being a NATO country confers a ton of benefits, whether we're talking about Russian aggression right now or whether we're talking about aggression from other countries in general. Being able to trigger an Article 5 is a really good way to keep your country safe.
For the NATO countries, yes, and also there's outside of the militaristic rationale to want to join NATO, a lot of those countries have a lot of animus towards Russia because of the ways that they were treated under the Soviet Union, and I do understand that, and that they see Russia as imperialistic and expansionist, which I think is also somewhat undeniable. We could talk about the specifics of what happened in Crimea and Donbass, but that expansionistic element of it, which I would say that was expansionist, but no one died there was one casualty of the Russian takeover of Crimea. Now far more people died in Donbass, but the Ukrainian government's also been shelling them since 2015. So
I mean, there's been a civil war that's been backed by Russia in the Donbass, so yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of shelling that goes on both sides there.
Right. I think the one quote I wanted to bring up, though, because I always find it interesting and relevant, is in May of '95 when Clinton was talking to Yeltsin about this. So this is after it's kind of moved into, we probably are going to expand, but it's going to be slow. Clinton had previously said, emphasizing that this was to emphasize inclusion, not exclusion. NATO expansion is not anti-Russian. It's not intended to be exclusive of Russia. There's no imminent timetable. The broader, higher goal is European security, unity, and integration, a goal I know you share. And then Yeltsin, later in the same year, says in response to NATO expanding, which in part involved not so much directly, but indirectly, the non-proliferation treaty, nuclear non-proliferation treaty. He said to Clinton later that year, I see nothing but humiliation for Russia if you proceed. Why do you want to do this? We need a new structure for pan-European security, not old ones. For me to agree to the borders of NATO expanding towards those of Russia would constitute a betrayal on my part of the Russian people. And that's 95. So
sure, but I mean, like Russia, no, I'm sorry,
them.
but like post-Soviet Union, Russia's not really in a position to dictate to the rest of the world what they're allowed to do, right?
Power-wise, no.
So the issue I think that the United States ran into is when we were initially thinking of slowly expanding NATO, the problem was that when it came to accept countries, first of all, we can't just accept one country from like a block. So for instance, when you look up in the Baltics, right, like there were initially people wondering like, should we just let in Latvia? Should we just let in Estonia? We just let, like, the problem is that like a lot of these countries have history between them of being competitive with each other and then being cooperative with each other. The problem is you probably just can't let one of them in. You probably have to start taking people in groups because the countries, it's going to cause strife and division in the countries if you just take in one. So I think that when NATO started to expand and when it became like this hot button topic where people were like, I want a NATO, I don't want to be fucked with by other people. It kind of started happening in large chunks just because of that. It became hard to exclude certain people. And as long as, if all the member states are voting to accept people into NATO, and if other countries are electing to join NATO, it becomes hard to say like, well, sorry, you can't because like an ex-dead superpower says you can't. I think from a liberal perspective, it's pretty hard to accept that.
Well, then the question is that why do you think Ukraine has been pretty much consistently denied NATO membership? Up until recently when it's now kind of on the table, but even now, not really.
I don't know.
Or Ukraine's been applying to NATO for a while.
I thought in 2014, I have to go back and look this up. I think that NATO, in 2008 gave Ukraine like a path to membership.
Yes.
Is it a membership ascension plan or a membership? There's a name for this.
Membership action plan.
Membership action plan.
Yeah.
So I don't remember why exactly they weren't able to join immediately, if there were some things that they had to get solved first. But I know that 2014 onwards. Probably because Ukraine is literally one of the most corrupt countries in the world. This is why like EU membership is off the line because they never would have.
Yes.
Yeah. But the 2014 onwards, I know that there's been like territorial dispute issues, and I'm pretty sure one of the big things for NATO is you can't join when you're in the middle of a territorial dispute onwards. So from 2014 onwards, as long as Donetsk and Luhansk or whatever are being contested, you can't join there either.
Well, it's Donetsk, Luhansk, and Crimea, and then also the
Crimea is not disputed territory anymore. Russia just owns it, right?
Correct. Well, the Ukrainian government says it's disputed territory.
Sure.
The Russian government says it's not disputed territory.
Sure.
There's also a problem with the demarcation line between Ukraine and Russia, which was never actually thoroughly ratified after 1992.
Wait, hold on. I hate to do this, and I don't want to. I never do this. Do you have a source for that? I've never heard. My understanding is that in 91, when Ukraine declared itself an independent republic, that country and its borders were 100% recognized by Russia.
It only resumed in 2014. Up until 2010, up through 2014, they weren't even sure whether. Yes, I'll find the source for this. I'll have to pull up my other document.
Sure. I'll never normally do. I'm sorry. I've never heard that before, so I'm curious.
Yeah, it was something weird that I came across in my research on it. I have my like.
Aiden, don't bother to look.
Notes and then my other notes.
I can find it.
Notes. Huh?
I can find it. Continue.
Yeah, it's in my notes, I think. Anyway, and actually, and I'll send those. Actually, I'll put them through the. This has got all the links to most of the stuff in it. It's in here somewhere, but
How did Yeltsin recognize Ukraine's independence with disputed borders? I don't understand how that works.
Yeah, I don't know either. It's mostly the issue with the demarcation line is about the oil and gas. This is the wrong document. Hang on, that's the old one that has like nothing in it. Sorry.
Here in Destiny.
Is that
and Aiden DM'd this to me in Zoom, so there's the link to her doc.
Yeah, this is it. So again, in 2014, which is the same year as Euromaidan, that's when we finally work began again on trying to determine the demarcation lines.
Well, in
And that was
2014, I got to understand because that's when Russia begins basically invading the country.
in Crimea. Yes.
No, not in Crimea and in the Donbass, when they start sending in military troops to support the separatist movements there.
Right. Oh, actually, there was not. I don't believe there was any. Okay, there's conflicting evidence on that, by the way. Now, I don't know what's true because when you're talking about two corrupt countries, it's hard to say.
There were
However,
absolutely like Russian military on the ground.
The Ukrainian government said that was wrong later.
They said that there hasn't been Russian military in the Donbass
at that point in time when the shelling began. I'll have to find it here in just a second.
Maybe not pre-2014, but
No.
post-Crimean annexation. I'm almost positive that Russia has had like military. Like, I don't think Russia even hides it. I'm pretty sure they just say it because they're there on like a peacekeeping mission, just like they did in Georgia.
They don't say it, but Russian side has been involved because at the very beginning of the Donbass situation, the separatists were pushed back to the Russian border and beyond it, and then they managed to reopen the front somehow, magically, with no involvement from Russians, supposedly, if you trust Russian state media.
Right. Let me find this. It's in this other document. But it was a Ukrainian state official, which again, I'll have to find it. So give me a moment here.
Yeah,
who
no
did
problem.
say that that they had said there had been all this Russian violence and Russian troops specifically in Donbass, and then came out a couple months later and said, yes, this was it. Chief of Staff Viktor Mushenko admitted in a news briefing that Russian troops had not been taking part in the combat operations in Donbass, meaning the military interventions on the part of the Ukrainian government seemingly had been committed against their own people. I'll find you the link for that in a second for the citation, because that's just my note on it. And I mean, that's a Ukrainian state official saying that. I don't know why they would lie, but let me, Mushenko.
While Aiden is looking for the source, I suggest, just out of safety, moving over to Discord. Because if the stream just goes down in 6 minutes, that's not going to be fun.
Oh yeah, hold on. Let me join the thing you like.
Link, I can do that.
Also, I did find the source. It's Sputnik now, so take it with a grain of salt. But I don't know how. I doubt Sputnik would have the capacity to. A lot of times, that's just for translation reasons. So. If you can get access to Sputnik where you are.
Wait, hold on. I'm joining the Discord.
Yeah.
Okay.
Move over as well. Spoon, are you okay to follow? Since Zoom is gonna kick us out.
I'm going to live show backstage.
Okay, I have to get Spoon to switch it over. All right, real quick. I'll head over to the Discord. See ya.
Does anybody know, is Sputnik News, is this Russian media? Does anybody know if this is like actually ran by the country of Russia, or I have no idea?
No more than your own country.
Our country doesn't run the media like Russia does. It's a fundamentally different
there we go.
State of affairs.
I didn't know Zoom had these kinds of time limits on them. Spoon, let me know when if you've got everything set up.
Yeah, there you go.
Is that a yeah? Oh, hang on. Forgot. Discord muted, my bad. Sorry.
Okay, so I've seen, so even reading the Russian state media, it seems like we're playing a little bit of a weird game here. So I see the chief of Ukraine's general military staff, Viktor Mushenko, acknowledged that Russian regular army units were not involved in combat action in the troubled Donetsk and Luhansk regions. Right now, the Ukrainian army is not engaged in combat operations against Russian regular units, he underscored. Mushenko added, however, that he had information about Russian civilian and military individuals fighting alongside independent supporters in the country's east.
Yes.
And then he also added that the Ukrainian army had everything it needed to rout what he described as illegal armed units in Donetsk and Luhansk. So it seems like there is military presence over there, no?
I mean, again, this is the Ukrainian state official. It's from Sputnik. But what it sounds like, if this is a correct report on what he said, the Russian military maybe was playing silly buggers and funding individual, say like a, the word is, I'm actually just doing some research on this of what word is correct. Combatant or separatist or whatever word you want to use. It's very likely, and I would say most likely, that the Russians were funding that.
Well, not just funding, but I'm pretty sure the big thing was that there were like no that fuck when oh god, we're testing my memory here. When the MH17 flight was shot down, I thought that the weapons platforms that were responsible for bringing that plane down was something that required like a decent military background to know. It's not just something that like a random rebel or a random separatist could do, but that there were weapons platforms that were almost certainly being controlled and ran by Russian military officials, or not officials, but by the actual Russian military members.
Was it ever confirmed that MH17 was shot down by Russians?
Absolutely.
Was it
like
confirmed?
I don't think
it's been a long time since I've heard on MH17.
It has been confirmed that it was shot down using a book system. The trouble is that both Ukraine, since it got legacy Soviet equipment, and Russia operate those, and it's the origin of the missile has been in contention by the Russian government. That
well, of course it is, but
everyone from the world has agreed that it originated from the territory controlled by rebels.
Oh, okay. See, I haven't looked into the
yeah, the whole thing was that the plane was shot down by a missile that almost certainly came from an area that was controlled by separatist people, and then the weapon system that the Buck that I don't know how you launch those missiles, but that the installation of it requires like a military know-how. It's not going to be like a rebel, like BLM is firing these missiles or something. Like it's going to require.
Well, there's massive military bases that exist before in Crimea. That's why Russia was able to take over with little to no resistance, because they were leasing military bases in Crimea. So
wait, hold on. This wasn't in Crimea though. This was in the Donbass.
It's in Donbass. Oh,
yes, this is in Donbass. Yeah, I don't know if Sevastopol has like Russian military like missile installation. They might, but.
Well, yeah, if that was from Crimea, it would have made sense, but I don't know about it. I mean, when both the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics are founded, a little bit. If you want to call them legitimate or not, but they don't seem to have a lot. They did have some military support and were armed, obviously, because they were able to overthrow the government. But
I'm liking this from the live chat. I don't know if we just think this is just not true or not, but like the latest incursion, which Ukraine's military said included 5 armored personnel carriers, was at least the 3rd movement of troops and weapons from Russia across the southeast part of the border this week, further blunting the momentum Ukrainian forces have made in weakening the insurgents and their redoubts of Donetsk and Luhansk farther north. Evidence of a possible turn was seen. So this is like, and this is in 2014 in August, saying this is the 3rd movement of troops over. Russia, which has denied it is helping the insurgents, did not acknowledge the military movements, but the Russians have signaled they would not countenance a defeat of an insurgency in the heavily Russian eastern parts of Ukraine, which would amount to a significant domestic political setback for President Vladimir Putin of Russia in his increasingly fractious relationship with the United States and European allies. Yeah, where are we at? Okay, you can read this for a second, then we can take a second back and regroup for where we're at in this part. Apparently, in the Dutch investigation of this as well, there's like literal film showing like Russia pulling back this weapons platform back into Russia after the MH17 flight had been downed.
I mean, I'd have to see it, because
sure, I understand.
One of the things, no, and it's actually not because I doubt it. Well, I do doubt it, and I'll tell you why. Is because, as I think the current situation is indicative, that when there's fog of war going on, and particularly between 2 countries that have a lot of issues with corruption. I mean, we got the whole Ghost of Kiev,
well, hold on, we should be really careful.
Fortunately,
Ghost of Kiev and Twitter memes are way different than like actual like military conflict on the ground. Like, I don't think there were like U.S. NATO intelligence is not confirming the Ghost of Kiev, right? These are like dumb Twitter memes, which I agree.
I saw some. I mean, did you see the and I've seen these in some news article reportings of the mobile crematoriums. I'm
not sure about that or what that.
Well, again, I've seen. Maybe it's mostly a Twitter meme, but I certainly saw some reporting of that the Russians have mobile crematoriums that they were, piling bodies into to destroy.
I
the
mean, I do
evidence.
know that mass graves have been found in places that have been taken back from the Russians, like in
For sure.
Mariupol.
For
I mean-
sure. It's the sensationalism of that I found a little bit suspicious.
Well, I mean, it's pretty insane if you've got another country marching into your country and like fucking murdering tons of civilians and raping them. I mean, like that's
Yeah.
a pretty fucked thing. Like, I understand the sensation behind it.
Oh, sure. And I think that's kind of the real. Like, I'm not in favor or supportive of what Russia is doing. My whole standpoint here is trying to explicate, particularly from the perspective of not even the Russian people, but the Russian government, why
Mhm.
they felt encircled and why this is happening, and why I think that the U.S. is maybe complicit is the wrong word, but
Yeah, and I think
involved.
that's a worthwhile discussion to have, but it doesn't feel like we have this discussion very honestly. Like here's what it feels like to me. It feels like Russia sees itself still, or at least Putin does, sees himself as controlling like what is still a world superpower, and he kind of wants to reestablish that presence in the world stage. Having Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine all together in his nice little union state would be a very nice thing to do. That'd be a good step in that direction. Russia doesn't like when NATO expands because it inhibits their ability to fuck with people on their borders. That's what it feels like to me. And now I can understand that Russia likes to fuck with people on their borders, but I think that in that framing, it becomes a lot harder to defend Russia's action rather than this weird treatment of like Ukraine as nothing and Russia is saying like, well, we have legitimate security concerns because NATO. Well, what is your NATO security
I'll tell
concern?
you,
Like,
I'll tell you
yeah,
the exact security concern with NATO
sure.
as it applies to Ukraine, more so than Poland, more so than any of the other countries that are nearby or bordering Russia. It's because the geography of Ukraine is a flat lowland that goes straight into Moscow.
Yeah, I understand. I
Right.
don't believe this. I
Well,
reject this. Historically, we can argue that wars were fought like this. Historically, we can point to like I think like 4 different times where Russia was invaded through the western. I forget the name of the mountain range, or like the because it's so flat, and there's the
Yeah,
funnel
I'm
that everybody
forgetting as
talks
well.
about. But like,
It's 50, by the way.
sure,
The East European
realistically,
plain is
sure,
50.
realistically though, that's not happening, right? Like nobody thinks that. And I can even ask like anybody that is trying to give this argument here, like, do we really think that if Ukraine joins NATO, there's going to be a NATO ground invasion into Russia? That's just not going to happen. So I don't believe that's a legitimate security concern.
No, not to us, obviously, but I think if you're the Russian government, I can see how you would maybe perceive it that way.
That there's going to be a NATO invasion? No way.
Either for
Yeah, go ahead.
legitimate reasons, because of the history of what can be seen as lies or let's say half truths or changes in opinion that the West has had, or because you know that it's useful for you to have an aggressive stance towards the West, because the West, in my opinion, has had a fairly aggressive stance towards Russia.
But how? Like, where is like the NATO aggression towards Russia?
I'm actually not going to talk about the direct NATO aggression, because of course, well, Yugoslavia would be, I guess, the one.
Yugoslavia is not Russia.
No, I know it's not.
It used to be a Russian ally for a while.
That's what I mean. From the Russian perspective, they could see that as aggression.
Used to be there were no Russian troops in Yugoslavia. This is not like it's not Russia. I don't agree that you can point to like a random attack of another country and then say, well, that's what Russia's scared about. Like very specifically, NATO is not attacking Russia. We literally have hotlines set up between the White House and the Kremlin to make sure that this never happens, that NATO troops and Russian troops don't cross swords. Like this idea that NATO is all of a sudden going to start attacking Russia is totally not.
I
It's
find
like a story. Yeah.
well, Article 5 was brought up earlier, and I find that to be. I think that that's an issue that Russians might be reasonably worried about. For example, when Poland is giving weapons to Ukraine, Poland is a member of NATO. Poland's military equipment is destroyed, or any Polish attack.
Wait, hold on, wait, real quick. You're cutting out a little bit. I think you need to turn the sensitivity down. Or yeah, be closer. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that. So Poland, I believe, sent military equipment, including planes and such, to Ukraine, right?
Okay.
Well, if Polish military equipment is attacked, it could theoretically be considered a procking of Article 5.
No, so Article 5 cannot be procced on troops on foreign soil. If you send like a soldier somewhere else and they get attacked,
I didn't know that part.
There's
you-
Article 7, I believe, that explicitly states that if a NATO member state engages in offensive action, the rest of the NATO is not obligated to be pulled in.
Okay.
Mhm.
So then that's
It's
not an issue.
7 or 8.
I was concerned about that, but then
Mhm.
if that's not involved, it's not an issue then.
Mhm.
Um, I think again the issue is that I primarily hold, that I wrote in an opening statement I didn't read, is that I think the big issue here is that hacking the United States 2016 election, and for years and years it was.
Well, hold on, wait. To be clear, Russia was blamed for trying to interfere in our election in some cases, but they did, right? Like the whole Internet
They
Research
hacked the
Agency was.
DNC. Yeah.
Sure. There was that, but there was an entire company that was set up in the United States that was illegally doing business with other Americans under the guise of being American. The Internet Research Agency. So I mean, like that's not a false accusation. Like that's absolutely true, right?
I think I think it now depends on definitions, which I hate going into definitions, but I think we had to go into a definition here of
Sure.
what entails meddling in another country's election.
Well, it's illegal, right? In the
No, I
United
know, but what
States, foreign agent in the United States, you have to be registered. You have to be registered as a foreign agent in order to do work in the United States. When you misrepresent your nationality or your identity, it's literally a crime. My guess is it's probably like that in every single country in the world.
I would imagine so as well. But as far as my understanding was that, yeah, Russian state actors appear to have hacked the DNC. But I'd never seen any evidence that they, and yeah, I'm familiar with the company you're talking about, but was there ever any evidence, as it was reported in 2016 and 17, I believe erroneously, that Russians had hacked voting machines and had
No.
actually
So
changed
I don't know if that was ever reported. And I know it's the case that was never verified. But I don't know if anybody seriously reported that. That's like one of the weird where people are like, oh, did they hack the election? Well, no, nobody hacked any voting machines.
I think it was mostly speculative, but it was passed around, and unfortunately, what you get as a result of that is a.
Well, sure, but we need to
induction of
separate like
people.
Russians aren't allowed to like feel bad and invade other countries because they're upset because
No.
of something that some people tweeted, right? I don't think the U.S.
Yes,
State
yes.
Department or the United States ever said that like Russia hacked our voting machines. I don't think that was ever the position of the U.S. government or the U.S. State Department. It was the position that it seemed like they were misrepresenting themselves as
Well-
foreign agents in the country, which they, unless you think that everything that was released about that was false, but.
No, I think that the part about them hacking the DNC was pretty much confirmed.
Yeah, the
However,
Guccifer stuff was, yeah.
However, if it's an issue though that Russia was doing this kind of stuff, I would think it's also an issue that the U.S. was doing similar kind of stuff in Kiev and across Ukraine in 2014.
What was the U.S. doing that was anywhere comparable to this in Kiev or anywhere across Ukraine?
Well, the State Department funded a series of tech camps that were supposed to be for the creation of viral videos, social media posts, in order to increase support for the. I mean,
Yeah, but hold on. Do you understand the difference? So, like, if Russia were to
I
come to the
know,
United States, if you were like a foreign agent, you come to the United
Mhm.
States and you're Russian, and then when you're here, you're like campaigning or you're doing whatever, like that's fine. It's when you misrepresent yourself. Now, I don't know anything about this, so it might be the case that what you're saying is that. But was the United States like covertly funding boot camps, obscuring the fact that it was from the United States, and then trying to subvert the government that way, or was this just
Well,
like the United
I'll
States?
tell you, I'll tell you this. I mean, I don't know if they've done it covertly or not, but I'll put it this way: all of the online evidence that the U.S. State Department was involved in the tech camps in Kiev you can only find it through the Wayback Machine. Those pages are no longer on the U.S. State Department website. I don't know if that's a cover-up. Maybe they just don't have any use for that page anymore, even though the tech camps are still going on in other countries that the State Department still funds. But I find it interesting that the evidence of these tech camps that were supposed to do, like there was a video that went viral called "I'm a Ukrainian," and it was funded. That comes out right after the most recent tech camp had happened in Kiev, right before the Euromaidan, and then as the Euromaidan starts, this video that went viral of it's a woman. She's in front of, the protests, and she's talking about how Russia is engaging in this horrible tyranny upon her country and asking the West for support. Not any specific support, but that video was also funded by the National Endowment for Democracy. And
Sure. And so we're getting into this weird world where we're talking about like what's okay, what's not okay. I'm not saying that Russia's presence in the United States was bad because Russia had presence in the United States trying to persuade people how to vote or whatever. The obscuring of it, that's the illegal part. right? Like if I go to another country and I say like, oh, fuck your leaders or fuck blah, 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 that's fine. But if I go to another country and say like, I am Russian and fuck your leaders or whatever, well, now we have a problem. You've engaged in a fundamentally different type of action. It wouldn't surprise me if the United States and all sorts of international orgs have presence in countries where we're trying to influence people to vote one way or another. That wouldn't surprise me. I would expect every country to engage in that to some extent, right?
How about this one then?
Sure.
Freedom
If I may
House, which is
cut
a
in,
non.
Eden,
Go ahead, Arthur.
the attack camps that you've referenced, they lasted for 2 days per year.
2
I've
days
been
per
to such
year.
events.
Yeah.
What?
It's 2
So
days
that's
per year.
nothing.
And they were
That's nothing. You can't learn anything in 2 days.
probably true. Probably true. I
So
will say this.
the size of the influence that you are showing here is a little bit tiny, and
Well,
it's not really
here's
important
the
to talk
problem.
about.
It's one exemplar. I'll go into another one.
Mhm.
The Freedom House, which is a nonprofit funded primarily by the U.S. government and the U.S. Democratic Party's National Democratic Institute, and that's by about 80% funded by those two groups. They helped fund and organize what they called, in their own words, "quote the largest civil regional election monitoring effort in Ukraine," and that they had 1,000 observers that they trained to ensure that the 2014 election was, quote, free and fair. I'm sorry, that wasn't 2014. That was 2005. My bad.
Okay. Wait, is that a bad thing or?
Is it? It's not a bad thing necessarily, but I'm saying if we're concerned about Russian financial influence in elections, well, the
Wait,
U.S.
do we not? There's a fundamental difference between like electioneering and like trying to misrepresent yourself as not a foreign agent versus like election monitoring, right? Like we want election monitoring. It's a pretty important part, especially in countries as corrupt as Ukraine. Wasn't oh God, wasn't Yanukovych once prior like thrown out because Ukrainians protested so much because they thought that the election was
Yes.
corrupt, and then I think he
It
lost that one.
was that 2005 election between Yanukovych and Yushchenko.
Yeah. Where the other guy mysteriously had a small bout of uranium poisoning as well, right?
It wasn't uranium poisoning, but he was
Or
poisoned.
yeah, interesting.
Plutonium.
Yeah, regardless, like again, these are fundamentally different actions. If you want to say that like we shouldn't be involved or invested in like election security or whatever, that's fine. But again, this is a fundamentally
that's my
different thing,
point.
right?
I don't think we should be, because
Like valid elections are a pretty important part of the Western world or of the entire world, like recognizing the authenticity of any self-proclaimed leadership, right?
I mean, yes, of course. However, I always am going to find any involvement of a foreign agent, a foreign country in some other nation's election, to be a little bit curious. I'll put it that way. Maybe not even suspicious, but
Sure, and that's fine. But I mean, there are plenty of other countries that can call us out if they think that we're doing something improper or if they think that we're like rigging something or doing something, right?
Sure. That started in 2005, though. That was with the Orange Revolution. So in 2005 is the first time you have the United States, in terms of major NGOs getting involved, and again, those NGOs largely funded by the US, State Department, that are getting involved in, even if it's just monitoring, in Ukrainian elections. And then I guess we could talk again about the 2014 election and the issues potentially there with the. I mean, again, the Euromaidan thing, I said about the tech camps, and I guess, they were only 2 days per year. It's just interesting that video comes out. It's funded by this Whisper Roar thing. Comes out a few days later. It goes viral as it was intended to. Talking about, Russians, and she's not really talking about Russians. How corrupt the country is, and they need to get rid of at that point, the predominantly pro-Russian government that was in charge before the Euromaidan. After the Euromaidan, I think it's unquestionable that the mainstream politics of Ukraine, who's in power, became more explicitly anti-Russian, moving away from Russia towards the EU and NATO.
Sure, but I mean that was already the case in Ukraine, right? This is one of the big reasons why the Euromaidan protests were happening, was because people were upset that Yanukovych was rejecting a deal that had already been approved by Parliament to join the non-exclusive European Union trade agreement, right?
However,
so I mean, yeah,
She campaigned
and also
by the way.
there was a competing. There have been competing deals though.
But hold on, but the competing deal was not the same, right? Russia, the deal on the table with Russia was to join a trade union, like a customs union. This is highly restrictive compared to just having a free trade agreement on the table with the European Union. Like these weren't the same. And I think that Ukraine in general is probably looking westward for like progressing their economy than looking towards Russia, which has all sorts of issues going on with it. I don't think you need a conspiracy or like a foreign country interfering with your politics to make the people naturally gravitate towards that. Like, I don't think that's that hard to understand.
Maybe, yes, potentially. But to put it into comparison, what was happening at the time is that the U.S. was offering $1 billion. This is in 2014 or late 2013 or early 2014. At this point, the U.S. was kind of offering Ukraine about $1 billion in subsidies. Putin offered them $15 billion to bail out the economy that was, plus a plan to basically have the prices for gas being shipped through the country, which was in total a $22 billion deal. Yeah, here we go, December of 2013. Yanukovych, before the Euromaidan, probably was going to take that deal because I'm just saying, from a purely economical standpoint, would you rather take $1 billion or $22 billion as a country?
Well, the $22 billion comes with the strings attached that you're going to agree to join Russia's exclusive customs union when Russia has been like increasingly kind of like isolating themselves from the rest of the world versus joining a non-exclusive European Union trade agreement. The European Union is the largest market in the world. I mean, I think you'd probably rather access to that European Union market, no?
Yeah, there's more money behind that $1 billion deal. You're not seeing it immediately.
Yeah, rather than being locked into whatever Russia wants to do in the future, there's probably a greater future for you going to the with the European Union deal.
True, although at this point, again, Ukraine has been passed up for NATO membership, I think 3 times.
Yeah, but you don't need NATO membership to be part of the European Union trade agreements, right? They're totally different
Yes,
things.
I know, but my point is, though, is that the whole time there was sort of this global politic game going on, as far as I can know, that was like, we'll kind of throw the potential NATO membership, EU membership on the table for Ukraine, but we're not going to actually let them in. And I would think that if you're in charge of Ukraine, and even though, yes, being involved in a trade deal with the European Union probably has far more benefits in the longitudinal term than it does in the short term of that $22 billion. But that was not also, it was $15 billion in loans today from Ukraine, or whenever it would have gone through, plus the gas deal, which would have been over the course of 5 years. It might have been. And that's a big deal because so much at that point of Russian natural gas went through Ukraine. Now, of course, then they built what's it called, Nord Stream 1 and 2, and that circumvents you. So I would think part of the reason, though, for the Russia's spending billions and billions it cost to build Nord Streams 1 and 2 was because they didn't think Ukraine wanted to play ball with them. And I think ultimately that was probably deleterious. I don't think probably, I guess unquestionably has been deleterious to the Ukrainian economy because they're not making that money off of taxes going through the old Soviet pipelines.
Yeah, I don't understand how. I don't understand what the point of this is.
Oh,
Yeah.
Well, my point is, briefly,
do we agree that like the Ukrainian people had a legitimate reason to want to turn to the European Union for economic security? Do we agree that that's like a legitimate thing they could have wanted?
I think they could have, believed that, but
Okay, so if we believe that they believe that, and the Euromaidan protests were happening somewhat in response to that, we also agree that Ukraine was one of the most corrupt countries in the world pre-2014. There were legitimate reasons why people had grievances, right?
Yes.
So like,
you
didn't need Western influence for those protests. You didn't need Western influences for them to want to join the European Union, like, or not to join the European Union, I'm sorry, but to join like the European Union to get a trade agreement with them. So like, yeah, I don't think there needs to be any Western meddling for any of these points. I think that the people of Ukraine genuinely wanted to look towards the European Union. My understanding is they'd already basically had that trade agreement penned out and agreed upon in the I don't remember the name for it, but the Parliament of Ukraine, the Rada something, yeah. So yeah, they're just, you don't even need Western involvement to explain everything that's happened. Like the people wanted a certain deal, their leader walked away from it for some reason, and then people started to protest like crazy. And then go ahead.
Yanukovych likely, my guess is Yanukovych likely walked away because of that competing Russian, and because he was far more pro-Russian politics. And
Sure.
Then after the Euromaidan, you get Poroshenko. Who's right after?
After Poroshenko is Zelensky.
After Poroshenko is Zelensky, but Poroshenko is after the with
yes.
Timoshenko. Yeah.
Wait, hold on, real
So-
quick, Aiden.
Mhm.
You have to speak into your mic more, or you have to turn the sensitivity down because sometimes you get cut off at the start of a thing.
Sorry. Oh, wait, it's probably my Discord settings. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where there's a sensitivity thing. Just like turn it down a few
Yeah.
notches, and then it'll stop cutting out.
Yep. Sorry about that. So yeah, in 2014, next we have it's Arseniy Yatsenyuk and Petro Poroshenko. So and going into Arseniy
Or
Yatsenyuk.
sorry, but sure.
Hmm?
Yatsenyuk was the prime minister, not
Yes, the PM.
president.
Yes,
Yeah.
Poroshenko is president. And again, I mean, we touched on this earlier, which is that, and I do think you're probably correct on that, is that, yeah, of course, you know, ambassadors are going to talk amongst themselves about who they'd prefer to be in power. But there's some things about that call that give me a little pause and I find a little bit disturbing. And it's not just that call. Again, all of these things, none of them exist in isolate, right? It's the compounding evidence for me that makes me think the United States was
Sure.
involved in ways that were inappropriate.
Yeah. So like, I don't have anything going on right now. I got all the time in the world. If you want, if you want to find the logs of that call, you can read through them and tell me something where like, oh, this looks like really shady.
No, I can just
Because I
tell
remember
you.
reviewing. Yeah, sure. Yeah. What are the shady? It just sounded to me like two diplomats talking about who they would prefer. Like this leader would be way better. We could work this. Like, yeah.
I mean, that's what they say. I mean, I'm not going to disagree with it. I know most of it by heart at this point. But, well, I can't read. I can't recite it. But you're right. That's the basic gist. Is they talk about three candidates. It's Arseniy Yatsenyuk, Vitaly Klitschko, and Oleg Tiahanibuk. And they say with Oleg Tiahanibuk, who is, and this is a whole nother issue. I talked about this. I made a 2-hour-long video on this. Some people were not happy about this, and so I guess it's probably the area to move into. Is Oleg Tiahanibuk is a member of Svoboda, a founding member of Svoboda, which does appear to be an actual neo-Nazi aligned sort of group. And they are not the only one.
They're a very highly nationalist group, but neo-Nazi aligned is a little bit iffy. I mean, some people point to some. Even at that, it was like 10 to 15% of their members was like the estimate, and Azov is down to like less than 900 members today. And in 2014, their leader like literally stepped away when they got integrated into the Ukrainian armed forces. So I mean, like the reality is, we should know this. Like, probably every single military around the world is going to be a little bit more prone to nationalists or far right people, even in the United States, just because of the nature of like what the military does. But
I would ask this though: if there was a military group in the United States that used the Wolfspangle and the Sonnenrad, I don't think and the Wolfspangle up until 2014 or 2015 they used the Wolfspangle. And of course, it doesn't have cultural.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the history of Italian. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's not cringe or that there aren't far right elements to that group, and that there probably are even fucking neo Nazis or quasi Nazis. Sure, like that. I would be an idiot to say there's probably no element of that.
Yeah,
but I think it gets like really overblown, especially in comparison to fucking Russia with the Wagner group and with the neo-Nazi groups that operate within Russian borders. I think it's just weird to let people fixate like hardcore on.
Well, I'll tell you why I fixated on it, I guess, to the degree that I did, which was mostly to, kind of understand it better. And of course, there are neo-Nazi groups in Russia as well. But I think we should call them what they are. Is that there's been such a hypersensitivity to this idea of these extreme far-right groups that are operating in the United States because they've got their MAGA hats or whatever. They're not walking around with swastikas. I'll put it. Some of them, but not to the degree that these people do. And I'll give you a quote.
Wait, in Russia or in the United States?
In the United States, there's
Okay,
there. I mean, sure, there are some swastikas being bandied around, yeah, but the prevalence of which, I mean, here's a quote. This is from the day after the protest. Right. This is a leader of the SNA, which is the Social Nationalist Party, Andrei Beletsky. He said that the goal of the Social Nationalist Party, which was operating at around the same time as Azov in around 2000. He said this in 2010, by the way. The goal of the SNA was the protection of the white race by creating an anti-democratic and anti-capitalist nationocracy system and the eradication of the international Zionist speculative capital. And in addition, that it was to lead the white races of the world in a final crusade against the Semite-led Untermenschen. So, just saying, in 2010, these are
sure, they're definitely Christian people. So, but their leader stepped away in 2014.
Some of them did.
Their primary leadership stepped away in 2014. I'm aware of that one fact. Also, if you want to talk about like cringe leaders of groups, I mean, like we can look at the leader of like the Wagner Group, which is Russia's like basically
Oh, yeah.
state-sponsored paramilitary group that
They've
currently
got, they've got a
operates.
couple actually.
Yeah. So I mean, like again, and then also like when we look at like the idea, because people try to argue there's a huge problem. Like the Svoboda Party has literally 1 seat in government right now. Like it's like not anywhere. Like I just like I mean there are issues we can talk about it, but again there are I would bet my life on this, and I know it'd be true. There are neo-Nazis
in 2014. I think they had up to 4.
Sure, they might have. There are neo-Nazis in the United States military. There absolutely are. It's that's what militaries are, right? There are always going to be like more nationalistic far right people that play into it. Is it bad? Yeah, probably. Should Ukraine look at it, and deal with these things with people wearing cringe symbols and shit? Yeah, probably. I think they probably should. But it's a little bit hard for me as an American who has like the fuck all going on in terms of military conflict in his country to look at Ukraine and say, hey, you know that you're the most battle-hardened battalion that's been fighting a literal fucking civil war for the past decade in the East? You need to go in and scold all those people for being too nationalistic. I don't think Ukraine is in a position right now to audit itself from like offensive thoughts from their like fighting squad. I agree it's a problem. It's bad. They shouldn't do it. But yeah, I don't think it excuses or helps anything that Russia is doing though. And I think that Russia has far worse neo-Nazi elements that operate with Putin's basically implicit approval, because nothing operates in Russia without Putin knowing about it. I think that there are more things to criticize them therefore, but
that's why I didn't start with it or anything.
Sure, of course.
But I think one of the things though that I do find curious about that is that Putin is very wont to bring up the neo-Nazi groups, or whatever you want to call them, the neo-Nazi kind of leaning groups in Ukraine.
Yeah, of course.
And certainly not in his own country. And I did find that to be, if you will, cringe. That was
because Nazis are like Nazis are Russia's communists. Right? Like in the United States, the way that we would drum up like fear in our domestic policy all the fucking time in our conservative groups was to talk about like communists. These are communists. These Democrats are socialists. They're communists. Because the U.S. has a history of fighting communism, and you can invoke communists to get all of our political people in the United States like all rallied. Oh yeah, fuck the communists. Like
you
historically, we would do that.
Nazi in the U.S. to be fair.
Yeah, but communist is more. It was more.
I'm not sure about that.
As somebody with military parents, I promise you, communists were way more fear than Nazis. That was all my fucking parents talked about, because that's like the Red Scare, like the Cold War was like for fucking decades, right? And people remember that. Yeah, people remember that in their head more. And in Russia, it's the same thing with fascism and Nazis, right? Like their proud claim to fame was, beating the Germans in the 40s, and that's what they did. And so I feel like Putin does the same thing. Like, oh, look at these Nazis, look at these fascists. Like we've got to fight against them, even though Russia operates essentially as a fascist regime. That's just their way of drumming up support for shit.
I'd say it's more autocratic, but that's a definition of that's the problem with definitions and terms.
Fascist regime can absolutely be autocratic. No.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not mutually exclusive. I think though that there is a history of Nazi collaboration in Ukraine. I don't know how useful that is either. I went over it in my video only to explain the history of everything there, because of course they're the national hero who was made a national hero by Poroshenko in 2000. When was it? I can't recall the year, but I think it was Poroshenko made Bandera the national hero.
Yeah, and then he got unmade because he wasn't a citizen and all that.
Yeah. So, but with Bandera, you do have to admit he did a little collaboration with both sides.
Sure. But I mean, hey, like Russia, the Soviet Union as a country literally tried to align itself with Nazi Germany, and they only did it because Hitler backstabbed them. I'm not saying, by the way, Ukraine definitely has some issues. The Bandera guy is pretty fucking weird. Even in Ukraine, he's considered controversial because a lot of people. Absolutely. There are marches.
Yes, it probably, but controversial, yes, but people also every year march down the street for him in hundreds, if not thousands.
Sure, they do. I mean, it's a big country. There's a lot of people in Ukraine.
True. Yeah.
Yeah, hundreds of thousands of people in a country with 44 million people is like, but I'm just saying that, like, yeah, there are definitely problems, right? Like in the United States, I'm pretty sure there are, like, we've got people that still fly fucking Confederate flags in this country. Holy shit. So yeah, I mean, like, there are problems. I'm not going to sit here and say that Bandera is an awesome, cool dude, but
actually probably a good comparison to the Confederate flag, I would say.
Sure. I just, yeah, none of this, I don't think any of this moves us even like a micrometer closer to Russia having a justification of like feeling threatened by Ukraine, or yeah.
Well, I think the main reason again for feeling threatened is because of the NATO expansion, and because of, as I said, that, and you're aware of it. I also can't.
What is the NATO expansion threat? Can you talk me through this? What are they scared about?
I can talk you through this while Aiden can take a break because she's had a sore throat recently. So.
Oh, but I took a Strepsil. But go ahead, Arthur. You're Russian.
Oh, okay. If you want to go ahead. No, fine.
No, Russia.
So Russia historically has been need to control the entirety of East European plain, which is a geographic body that is mostly flat, with very little change in elevation and very little in the way of natural defenses. If we want to establish a defensible Russian border, it would have to go through basically all of, German-Polish border. Otherwise, you have to defend like 2,000 miles of flat land, and
At least, yeah.
distance from that to Moscow is like 3 days by motor rifle divisions.
So like I've heard this thing brought up a lot. I just don't accept it. Because my next question is going to be like, do you expect that should Ukraine join NATO, is there going to be like a threat of a ground invasion of an army marching towards Moscow, flying NATO
It's
flags?
not even that NATO is gonna use Ukraine as a staging point. It's that Russia must control a bunch of states in order to be secure from anyone.
What secure from what? So is there
from
another
their-
army that's
Also
going to invade through Ukraine, or?
Just to be clear, from what I've been talking about the entire time, and to reiterate, it's from the Russian government's perspective that this is coming from. Not necessarily a realistic one, but when you go again into the history as to why Russia does not trust the West and does not trust NATO, from their whether or not it's true, by the way, whether or not the talk with Gorbachev is true, whether or not that mattered because it was the Soviet Union and not Russia, the perspective of people in power in the Russian government is that NATO and the United States cannot be trusted to keep their promises.
Sure.
And
And
they could anytime betray
I
them.
really, really, really want to hear about this, though. Okay, I want to focus on this one thing. So let's say that Ukraine joins NATO. Like, what next? Like, is Ukraine going to attack Russia? Is another army going to march through Ukraine to attack Russia? Is NATO attack? Like, what is
I think it's the Article 5 fear. It's that.
the?
No, it's
Yes,
not.
I agree with that. I agree with that. But now, what are we saying? We're saying that Russia is scared if Ukraine joins NATO, because if Ukraine joins NATO, Russia can't attack Ukraine. This is the whole reason NATO exists. That's the justification for NATO existing that Russia says shouldn't be a case, right?
Unless, and again, Russia's fear may be that because you know that there are multiple sort of separatist movements that appear to want to join Russia, appear to. I mean, there were votes held in Crimea. There were votes held in Donbass. Now, how accurate can a vote be that's being held under duress while being occupied by a foreign army? Not very accurate, I would say.
Wonder if some observers with Western training would have helped with that.
maybe you're correct. But actually, probably correct on that front. But I think that it's a fear, even if it's an irrational fear, because but I don't think it's totally irrational, because I don't think that I think neither the U.S. nor Russia have really been able to let go of Cold War scars. That stuff's all still there, and it's the fear that it's a perception that Russia is still the Soviet Union. And
I feel like, in general, I mean, the United States has had a pretty friendly disposition towards Russia post collapse of the Soviet Union, all considered. No, like there was like literally an establishing of like a NATO treaty or party for greater cooperation with Russia.
Partnership for peace, yes.
Yeah, there was a post 9/11, like a lot of cooperation with Russia for matters of like terrorism. There was a whole bunch of coordination between Russia and the United States. And there were offers made towards Russia saying that if they wanted to join NATO, they would have had the opportunity to, but Putin didn't want to go through the process to do it. So
actually,
I mean, like,
Putin originally did.
originally he might have, but when everything was like
verbally, not legally.
Yes, verbally, it's the same problem where, it was a verbal. He said, basically he wanted to go through with NATO and then changed his mind on that. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, like this idea that NATO has had this aggressive disposition towards Russia when we've taken every effort not to attack them or anything, even in other countries, even in other foreign countries, we make an effort not to attack Russian troops. I don't buy that. I think that Russia wants to control Ukraine because if Ukraine is Russia's bitch, it just shores up their like status as an empire so much more. They get to influence that country. They get access to the country's resources. They have a nice big old buffer state that makes them feel good about themselves, and they get to feel a little bit more like a superpower like they used to be. They get to strut their shit a little bit.
I think it's actually,
to your question about what fear does Russia have from NATO, it's not a short-term fear. I would agree with you. There isn't any rational indication from NATO to attack Russia. Well, prior to the current Ukraine situation, which was brought on by Russia, but still. That may change in 50 years. That may change in 100 years.
Yeah, but we can't run foreign policy right now based on hypothetical threats 5 decades away from us, right? Like
true.
that's not a good reason to compromise.
The United States doesn't have to do that. The United States is very well defended geographically and through, a massive network of allies, but still, Russia isn't. This is the reason why Russia is doing these things. And I'm not saying it's a justification. I'm saying it's a reason.
Right, which is where I'm coming from with most of my positions as well, is that we're not justifying what Russia's doing, but trying to explain why they're doing what they're doing.
Well, but I think that it's a bit farther because you're trying to say that the West is at fault for what Russia is doing, that there's some responsibility to the West. And I don't agree that treating countries like sovereign states and letting them make decisions about their security arrangements like counts as provoking Russia. If it does, like, I mean, we can say it at that point that it does, but if you want to, then we have to acknowledge that we're treating Russia like a low-functioning autistic child, where like if you make a sudden movement, they're gonna like jump and attack you. Like that's like
if
that.
China had a military alliance
that Russia's
with Canada,
transaction then.
To clarify, I'm not saying that we need to treat Russia this way.
But when we justify their thing here, we have to say like Ukraine, I'm sorry, you guys aren't allowed to make any decisions for yourselves because like the crazy guy to the east of you, might jump down your throat. That's essentially what we're saying.
I'm saying that Russia will jump down your throat. Irrelevant of NATO's actions, which our positions with Aiden are different here.
Sure.
But my contention there is that this was well known that this is how, I mean, any, geopolitical scientist could have told and did tell the West and NATO this. George Kennan's exact quote on it is in response to NATO expansion. This would have been in 1994. He said, quote, "I think it's the beginning of a new Cold War. I think the Russians will gradually react quite adversely, and it will affect their policies. I think it's a tragic mistake. There was no reason for this whatsoever. No one was threatening anybody else. This expansion would make the founding fathers of this country turn over in their graves. We have signed up to protect a whole series of countries, even though we have neither the resources nor intention to do so in any serious way. NATO expansion was simply a lighthearted action by a Senate that has no real interest in foreign affairs. What bothers me is how superficial and ill-informed the whole Senate debate was. I was particularly bothered by the references to Russia as a country dying to attack Western Europe. Don't people understand? Our differences in the Cold War were with a Soviet communist regime. And now we are turning our backs on the very people who mounted the greatest bloodless revolution in history to remove that Soviet regime. And Russia's democracy is as far advanced, if not further, as any of these countries that we've just signed up to defend from Russia. Of course, there is going to be a bad reaction from Russia, and then the NATO expanders will say, well, we always told you that's how the Russians are, but this is just wrong. That's
I disagree with that analysis. I think it was just wrong. When was this made? In 1994?
Yep.
When did we have like the huge enlargement rounds of NATO? In 2004 is when like 6 different. That's when all of the that's when all the Baltics joined, and I think Romania, and there were a few others. Like there was a 2020, I think a couple more joined. Fuck, I need to look this up. I think 2004 was the huge like expansion round when you had like fucking like 6 different fucking countries, or maybe 7 different countries joined, right?
Yes.
Well, why didn't Russia attack anybody then?
In 90s and the noughties.
Right? I don't think that Russian aggression has anything to do with NATO expansion. I think Russian aggression
that's
has to do
the
with
prime
the
reason for NATO expanding.
That's not even what I said, but no, I think the issue is that
no, that is
Russia
the reason for NATO's existence, is to protect against threats from Russia. I have a question. Since the fall of the wall...
I didn't mean to finish my point. Wait, let me finish the thing real quick, okay? So in 2004 was when you had your 5th round expansion from NATO. Russia wasn't like doing anything towards Ukraine then, right? I think that when you look at Russia's treatment towards Ukraine, it's because of politics that are happening specifically inside Ukraine. I think Yanukovych getting kicked out is what instigated their invasion into Crimea and then the invasion into eastern Ukraine. It was because of Yanukovych getting kicked out, not because a membership ascension plan was on the table. But okay.
Yes, it was in 2004. That was Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Slovakia, and Slovenia. So
there was one in the 90s, which included Poland, the
Hungary, and the Czech Republic, I think.
Yep.
Yeah. Also, while there's a break in the discussion, I would like to ask Aiden to read the super chats because Kizzy is yelling at me in DMs. And Destiny, if you may read podcast live chat. There are people tagging you.
I have a single question I want to ask because I don't have much to say on this. What example of Russian military aggression happened between the fall of the wall since like 2008?
The fall of the
Chechnya?
Waltons in
The
2008.
fall of the
wall-
wall since 2000 till 2008.
Sure. In 92, I think Transnistria was broken off of Moldova. And then in 2008, you had South Ossetia and
Ossetia, I think.
Abkhazia.
I had to learn how to
Ossetia? I've
pronounce
heard it
that.
pronounced 15 different
No, I
times.
had to learn.
And
I had to
Abkhazia
learn.
were broken off from Georgia. Those were the two big things. But I think what happened in
Chechnya.
Transnistria with Moldova, I think, was like a pretty good blueprint for how they operate in the future. You find like a separatist group that is kind of supportive of your country. You send in troops, you break it off, you ship in a ton of Russian passports. You say you've got an ethnic interest here, and then you recognize this as a separate state with like some permanent Russian peacekeeper
Well-
troop presence, which is what they did in Georgia as well.
Do they not have an ethnic interest there? Because in Ukraine, for example, this
If
is
you're
what I have the most-
that's a fascist ideology. Number one, is saying you have an ethnic
no,
interest.
no,
in
no,
it.
no.
And then number two, I think that historically it's weird for Russia to talk about ethnic interests in places when those ethnic interests were artificially created sometimes through famine, like the Holodomor, like exactly what happened in eastern Ukraine,
Oh, sure.
where millions of Ukrainian people are killed, hundreds of thousands of ethnic Russians are shipped in, and then to use that as a justification, 8 decades down the line or whatever, and say, well, now we need to invade a particular ethnic interest, I think is not good. Yeah.
What? Obviously not. But I mean, the Holodomor is obviously one of the greatest tragedies of human history. And one of the things that happened is because there was such an incredible loss of life of Ukrainians. Yes, the Russians came in, and they had done that to some of those areas, and that's primarily or a lot of it in the Donbass region. So, but
To provide a little
At
bit
the
of a
same time,
balance here,
we're not talking about
Russia
any
also
of
got
the-
hit with the Volga region of Russia also suffered a lot from Holodomor, but there wasn't any ethnic replacement, which is the relevant part. So
the ethnic question, right? Which that doesn't sound like it's going in a good direction. But the ethnic issues in Ukraine is, as I mentioned, sort of in the beginning, that you have parts of the southeast that have a large Bulgarian and Romanian population. You have parts in the northeast that have or northwest, sorry, west on both of those, not east. In the northwest population that is a lot of Polish, which because it includes Lviv or Lvov, and then on the western front, of course, you have Crimea and you have Donbass, and those areas in Crimea and Donbass do have something between a 60 and 80% ethnic Russian population. Now, yeah, 80 years ago, we know why those regions end up with such a high ethnic Russian population, but it's also important to note that particularly after Zelensky comes into power, there is a kind of crackdown. Now, already, way before this, starting with in 2014 with the Euromaidan, it was pretty clear that there was a move away from favorability towards Russia, right? In the government. They were moving more towards the West, more towards NATO. But then you get the kind of stuff there under Zelensky with the banning of the Russian language channels. And I can see that would
So I
only
mean, like we
exacerbate
can
it.
sure, but so the issue is that you have this complicated interplay where, especially in places Crimea, and in places in eastern Ukraine, you have these like Russian channels that are ran by Russian oligarchs that are basically permanently broadcasting Russian propaganda into your country and into your people's ears. I don't think Russian was explicitly banned. I thought they just made it so that the primary language of every place had to be Ukrainian.
Yes, it has to be. It can't be used on governmental forms.
Yeah. So I mean, like, is that the best solution? I don't know, but it's a really hard thing to deal with when you have a massive bully on your border that is like invested in taking over your actual country. Yeah, like I don't know. I know that there's been a lot of fights in Ukraine, like especially after Zelensky trying to like get rid of some of these like oligarchical ran radio propaganda channels. But I mean, I don't know if that's like the ideal way to do it, but to just say that they're doing it for no reason or like, oh, well, it's just an evil, horrible thing. Like, I think it's pretty understandable why they would. Yeah.
It's understandable why they would, but it would be kind of like if, I mean, analogies are never really good because you can never analogize one massive 1,000-year-old geopolitical issue with another. But to me, it would be kind of like if we banned Spanish language from governmental forms because we theoretically see Mexico as being an existential threat to the United States, to U.S. security. But the Republicans have made those kinds of arguments, and I don't think that would be a good rationale as to ban the Spanish language. Because
I don't think I could be wrong, but in
threat for Mexico.
I don't know if in the United States, I don't think we have a national language, right? So I don't know if it's the same thing. I don't know if there is a national language in Ukraine or not, but I'm pretty sure in the United States, I'm almost positive in the United States, we don't have an official declared language. But again, like it would only make sense if like there's so much. Yeah, fuck. I understand you're saying this. So I'm not trying to say you're saying this, but there's so much history between Russia and Ukraine
Oh, yeah.
that I think makes it a little bit more understandable when Ukraine, like if we were to start banning like Spanish channels, that'd be one thing. But if we were to start banning Spanish channels in regions of our country that have been forcibly occupied and arguably genocided by Mexico for over 100 years, I think it would be fundamentally a different question. Now it still might be
Yes, I
bad,
agree.
but like
I agree. I said, like I said in the beginning,
yeah,
I
I
don't think
understand
you
you're saying
compare
yeah.
them, but it was the best of my
Mhm.
capacity. So what I can see though how if you're a ethnic Russian, you speak Russian, you live in Ukraine, and you see something like that come out of the banning of the Russian language channels, even if they are propaganda, which I'm sure they are, and I don't think that, by the way, a lot of Ukrainian media is probably not propaganda either. Again, highly corrupt nations we're talking about on both sides here.
Mhm.
And the other issue is that, and you're also seeing that now I can't use Russian on my government forms, I have to use Ukrainian. I can see how if you're one of those people who lives in a highly ethnic Russian area would want to go, I feel like the state, and it happens right after this big, giant overthrow of the existing government, right? Or it starts to happen after that in the next couple of years. Of the previous government, excuse me, that was more pro-Russian and more pro-working with Russia. Why you would start to think that maybe your country has been taken over.
Sure. And I think that everything you've said like lays over like a good argument for some like domestic disputes that are either going to be fought in elections or worst case scenario, maybe even some sort of like separatist movements if it gets really, really bad.
I mean, that's what's happened. So,
But again, no, that's not what's happened. What's happened is a foreign country has come in to steal land from a sovereign nation. So it's
No,
like
no,
20
but
million times worse, right?
in Donbass, though, I mean,
Still, it's
Even
the
in
same.
Donbass, it's 20 million. A foreign country has stepped in to do
Now.
the opportunity to break, well, from 2014 onwards, right? Which is when this language stuff was even being talked about. Yeah.
yes, but well, again, we'd have to get into that question of where there was there Russian military force. I don't know about that Sputnik article. That's all I have to go on.
Even in that Sputnik article, though, they said that there were Russian military personnel in there. They just said that they weren't currently fighting with them. Even we can go back and read that.
Sure.
Even in that Sputnik
No,
article,
I
and
recall.
that's literally Russian state media too. You know, so I just I mean like again, banning a language is rough, but holy shit, you're literally being invaded by the guy next to you. He's stolen your peninsula.
Sure.
And now he's like funding civil wars in the east and sending military people. Like I'm empathetic, even if I don't think it might have been the right call. But and I don't even know if Zelensky still stands by that. He might have admitted retrospectively that was a mistake. But
Well, that was quite the one thing was actually quite recent. I think it was in because Zelensky's only been in power since 2019. So
17, no?
2019, yeah, I believe. Yeah, in 2019,
Okay,
June of
fine.
2019, yeah. So when did he do the? So it's only been a few years, but I mean, again, it's understandable. But I guess I see the entire situation as being, and my irritation with the coverage, and this is why I thought it'd be interesting to talk about it, is that you see so much as just Russia evil, Russia bad. I would not dispute that Russia invading Ukraine is a bad thing, obviously. My only contention is that I think there are mitigating factors that explain it. They don't excuse it, but they certainly explain it in a way that's not really being covered very well by Western media. I guess it doesn't matter anymore because apparently we've forgotten about this issue and we've moved on to Roe v. Wade. But you know,
sure. I would agree with you in most circumstances. I don't think I would agree in this case. I think Russia is just a horrendously bad actor in this case. I don't think there's a good reason or justification for why they're doing what they're doing. And I don't think presenting it as them having legitimate security interests is any more honest than saying that the ghost of Kiev is single-handedly diving into the ocean and destroying Russian, vessels with his bare hands. I think that Russia has a very selfish interest here in rebuilding their empire. I think that everything showcases that. If they were, worried about NATO aggression and they were responding to that, I would have expected to have seen something in between 2004 and 2014, but they just happened to invade to defend their base and steal land from Ukraine after, their guy got basically ejected from the country. It seems like that's probably more the rationale for why they did anything than anything having to do with NATO.
and to be fair, he did have to run away to Russia. So
Well, he didn't have to, but
He did.
well, he didn't have to tell the police to start shooting protesters. Now, after that, he probably felt the
Oh.
need to, but he wasn't. It's not like they always like Euromaidan lasted for months, 8 months. I think.
That's actually incorrect. Well, I don't know if that's incorrect or not, but there's a contention there on that specific point. So that was Olga Volgamets.
If I may cut in a little bit,
Mhm.
Aiden, I'm being yelled at again to read super
Uh-huh.
chats because you didn't.
Sorry. One more. I'll read it real quick. Kizza for £5 says, Destiny, would you feel comfortable with Russian military bases right on the borders in Canada and Mexico? Yes or no?
No. So people always point this out as like, well, look, what if Russia was setting up military bases in Mexico or Canada? But the reality is that the history between these two regions are just, they're so not comparable. If it was the case that the United States was sending like military forces into Mexico and military forces into Canada to like bomb people or take over places or support rebels to break off states, then I mean, I would still probably be opposed to it as an American, but I'd be like, yeah, I mean, I understand it, of course, right? But like America has so much respect for the sovereignty of the people on our borders that despite how much illegal immigration comes through Mexico, despite gang violence, despite cartels, despite drug shipments, like we don't send troops into Mexico to bomb their shit or to blow up buildings or whatever. Like we don't have that relationship at all with people on our borders. So to say that like, well, Russia should set up military bases, I don't see how you feel. Well, if we were treating our partners like Russia treats countries like Georgia and Ukraine, I mean, I would be a lot more sympathetic towards that analogy, but we don't. So
If I may go off of that, then.
Moreover, NATO
sorry.
hasn't set up any military installations closer to Russian borders than Ramstein Air Base in Germany and in Incirlik, I think, air base in Turkey, both of which are equidistant from Moscow.
Yeah.
And it's 2,500 kilometers. So
it's pretty far.
1,000 miles.
Again, it's a fear, but I would ask though, based on that previous question, do you think it was a reasonable fear then for, and I know this is a little bit non-relatable, but do you think it was a reasonable fear then for U.S. citizens to be worried about Russian missile bases in Cuba?
Yeah, but I think that the whole arrangement of like nuclear stuff back then was just so much different because I think that there were legitimate like second strike concerns when it came to having nuclear bases that close to other countries. Today, I'm talking a little bit out my ass, but no one has emailed me and told me that I'm wrong, so I'm assuming I'm right. I don't think today there are legitimate second strike concerns anywhere in the world because of how the nuclear triad functions, namely nuclear submarines. Like at any point in time, Russia, the United States, and I guess Britain gets a participation trophy because I think they have one submarine, is like anywhere in the world with the potential to do a second strike. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, I think second strike was talked about a lot because range of missiles became really important because people weren't sure if they would have second strike abilities. Like the reason why the Soviets were trying to ship missiles to Cuba is because I don't think they thought either ICBMs didn't exist or their ICBMs couldn't reliably get to the United States, and that's why they wanted to set stuff up closer to the United States. So like, yeah, I think it's just fundamentally a different arrangement of power. That's why it's hard when you use nuclear weapons to talk about historic arguments because then the nuclear weapons kind of change everything.
If I may push back a little bit on this,
Yeah.
the second strike capability of the United States would not be compromised by Cuban nuclear missiles because the United States used to fly massive nuclear bomber sorties near Soviet airspace 24/7. Well, throughout the whole Cold War thing, they were flying them for a while, but during the Cuban Missile Crisis specifically, they were flying them 24/7.
Sure, that wouldn't surprise me if during the Cuban Missile
communications
Crisis.
existed, so you could conceivably see a missile, tell your bombers to go in, second strike is achieved.
Sure, but I think the issue was that at that time, people saw that as an escalation of getting us like what is it, minutes to midnight, people would say. Like it was bringing us closer to the brink of nuclear war for no reason. And I don't know if at that time, I would have to go back. I don't know where nuclear missiles were set up in Europe because like even in Eastern Germany, right? Like that was a big thing for Eastern Germany. They didn't want that part to be militarized if German reunification happened because they didn't want like military installations to get closer to Russia, right? Or the Soviet Union.
It's how you end up with the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Although actually that's a question to bring up. I have one thing I'm going to bring up about the snipers, but before we get back into that, I have a question. Do you think that the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty that caused all of these post-Soviet states to sign over their nuclear armaments was a good thing?
Nope. If I may push back, because this is going to go off the rails.
Uh-oh.
Who had the nuclear launch codes for those nuclear warheads? Aiden?
It would have been well, at that point, would have been the Russia SFSR.
Exactly. So no Soviet states, aside from Russia, actually had nuclear capabilities. So it's not the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. It's the way Russia controlled its nuclear arsenal.
Right. And however, when we're talking about the coming out of the Soviet era, if all of these post-Soviet states could have kept their nuclear arsenal and been able to integrate it into their own systems, totally remove, take out, eviscerate any possibility for Russian control over it, I think that would provide them with I don't think Russia would be invading Ukraine right now if they had kept their nukes, is my opinion.
Yeah,
I
of
don't know how
course.
you feel.
That's a huge reason why people point to like in '94, that Budapest memorandum that was
Right.
made between, all the nuclear powers and
Mm-hmm.
Ukraine. It kind of fucked them over. But I think that in general, I think that the entire world kind of likes the idea of the fewest number of players having nuclear weapons as possible. And I think that's kind of why we aim for nuclear proliferation. And that's also another argument for NATO existing. Like, if you join NATO, you guys don't need nukes because we can protect you with our nukes. Kind of. Now, ideally,
I do not. I know that's the sort of argument, but I find that to be not sufficient. Because
well, it's not sufficient on its own, but it's one of the reasons. That's why people point to, like, if Ukraine falls to Russia, this is in a way a threat to nuclear security, because you essentially said, because this hasn't happened in so long that a country's invaded another country to steal land. If we allow that to happen, people are basically going to say, like, okay, well, if you want your sovereignty to be respected, you need nuclear weapons. There's like no shortcut.
I think that's true. I actually think that
but that's not true. Being in NATO is enough to have you not invade it. There's a reason why Russia's not invading Poland, Hungary, Latvia, Estonia, right? Because they're in NATO, and they don't have. I don't think they have nukes in those countries.
True. However,
I would make an argument that those are next on Russian docket.
Probably.
Absolutely not. I don't think so. But
I mean, okay. So I actually, I don't think that Russia's invasion of Ukraine is pretty specific. It's because of this long history of things that have gone on, because of perception that the United States is puppeting Ukraine, because Russia already has. I'm not saying whether or not you believe it's true. Perception that the U.S. and NATO are puppeting Ukraine without actually going through with inviting them in as a full member into either the EU or NATO. It's a perception that the Ukrainian government is a farce, which Putin has said directly that he doesn't think that the Ukrainian government is legitimate. It's a perception that Ukraine is Russian rightful clay because of the Kievan Rus. Literally, Kiev was the capital of that. It's because of the perception that and not this correct perception that Ukraine has a whole bunch of natural resources that Russia really wants.
Okay.
So,
or doesn't want in the market competing with Russia's.
Yeah, none of this again is a justification for Russia getting to invade. But I mean, I understand they have interest there, of course. But like,
I would agree. Of course, I think. Well, I don't think anyone could. It'd be difficult to not agree that the these being the rationales are rationales from the Russian perspective. Are they good rationales? No, but those are the rationales nonetheless, right?
Sure. I mean, what you just said there, I would agree with. Russia has national interests in Ukraine, of course. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Sure. Also, Kiza for £5 says the U.S. doesn't respect nation states and borders. They haven't for decades. Grenada was a prime example, and let's ignore the forever wars. And that is an issue I have here, is that I feel like this is an extension of some forever war stuff. It's not the only issue. I have multiples. But
I think U.S. foreign policy looks markedly different pre-91 and post-91. I think that we can agree that, like, Iraq was most likely a mistake. Afghanistan, the occupation was probably a mistake. If we can, the initial thing was probably okay. But like, generally, if we look to the broader scope of NATO missions, like, they're generally pretty limited in scope. They usually have approval from the UN or even from China and Russia sometimes.
That's always a good thing. I mean,
okay. Well, I mean, I just want to say, whether we say it's good or bad, it's markedly different than, like, let's find despots or let's find fucking foreign dictators, support them and overthrow countries or whatever, right? Which is probably more what the U.S. In the Cold War for sure, but like
post Gaddafi.
What?
What about Gaddafi?
Libya was a NATO approved mission, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's not, so one, it's not the United States doing something. Two, we weren't looking to, whether, I'm not going to say that the aftermath of Libya is like a good thing.
Because it's been kind of awful, as we all are aware.
Sure, of course. But again, like, that was a mission that was limited in scope. It didn't involve the United States, like, trying to install another ruler that would be friendly to U.S. interests or whatever. It was a fundamentally different type of foreign affair than, and it was approved by the UN too. It was a fundamentally different type of foreign affair than what the U.S. would have been doing, like, in South America or whatever during the Cold War.
And
Not saying it's good or bad, just fundamentally different, I think.
Where I find a consistency between some of the stuff that went on with Gaddafi and the stuff that went on in Ukraine is that it seemed that there's foreign economic, and by this I mean specifically Western economic interests that coincide with this regime change stuff. So with Gaddafi,
whoa, hold on.
Yeah.
Libya was not about foreign economic interest.
The French government made a deal with the insurgents, whatever you want. There's never a good word for this. The rebels in Libya at that time to set aside 35% of their nation's oil and gas for France in exchange for assistance and recognition of the new government.
So I would have to see what is the percentage of oil that they were getting from Libya, but I'm pretty sure that all of Libya, Gaddafi's presence in Libya was something that was condemned by the entire fucking Western world.
Oh, sure, he was a dictator. That's unquestionable.
No, not just a dictator. That he was murdering political dissidents. That he was torturing his fucking citizens. He wasn't just a random dictator. He was a pretty bad dude. Everybody wanted to see go.
Sure, I don't think anyone would deny that. However, and I hate to put a however on this, but he did help make Libya one of the most economically prosperous countries in the Middle East at that point in time. And
sure, baby, but
I'm not saying much was everything else. Does it explain away all these things, or does it help make them not condemnable? No, but Gaddafi had done a lot to make his country much richer than those around it, and the insurgents, the protesters, were given money and assistance from the French government.
Sure, that I don't know the extent of the French government involvement. I have to look it up. I just know that he was universally condemned by everybody across all of Europe, and I know that the dude was fucking insane. I'm pretty sure that guy was he was accusing Coca-Cola of hiding. He was accusing Coca-Cola of hiding LSD in their fucking drinks to brainwash his population. That dude was insane. But
sure, I don't think anyone would contend that Gaddafi. First of all, he'd been in power for something like 45 years. Or 40 years or something like that. So I wouldn't deny that, but I think it was. I
don't think there's a valid comparison between Gaddafi and Zelensky. I
wasn't comparing Gaddafi and Zelensky. I'm just saying that the United States' involvement in some of these countries, because it was in the Hillary Clinton leaks that this came out that they were going to that the French government in particular, and they had these two former Libyan ministers, one of the ministers of justice and one of the interior, who had both left the Gaddafi government, and they were working with the French government to aid in his overthrow. And of course, the French government did bomb Libya, Libyan air force bases, excuse me.
Sure.
So when you have these emails that say that they're making these deals. And again, Gaddafi is a monster, but still, it's happening around the same time, actually, as this Euromaidan stuff. And to me, I'm not saying that it's proof of one or the other, but it seems to me that it's just piling on the evidence that the United States has been involved in these kinds of backroom.
I don't think it's evidence of anything. I think that it's a lot of disparate, completely disconnected things that I don't think play it all into. Because it sounds like we're trying to build some weird case of Euromaidan being a foreign backed thing, when I don't think there's any evidence of that. We can look at we got rid of Gaddafi, who the entire UN wanted gone. This is literally a UN mandated mission. I don't think it's at all comparable.
Well, the Euromaidan was in part inspired by some of the by their own words, some of the organizers' own words, by the Arab Spring.
Okay. But
I'm not saying it's identical.
Well, hold on. Wasn't the Arab Spring seen as a pretty organic thing, starting in Tunisia, that kind of sprung across the greater Middle Eastern, not nobody, or do you think the Arab Spring was Western backed, or?
I think it's possible. I don't have any evidence for that. I think it's possible though, considering these backroom deals that were going on with the French government. I think it's possible.
Wait, hey, were these backroom deals, or were these blatant deals that the French government was making? Was any of this private or secret, or?
It was private. It was released through the Hillary Clinton document leaks, her email leaks.
Okay, I'm gonna bite on this just because I'm curious. I'm gonna be right back in 2 minutes. Can you send me a link to that? And I just want to read through what these quote unquote leaks are. Okay, I'll be back 1 second.
While Destiny's gone, Aiden should really read her super chat.
I do have another super chat.
From what I've
trying to find
seen, there have been a lot of them.
Wait, there's another one?
There should have been a lot of them.
Which is the other one about Grenada from Kissa?
There's one just recently about see.
Oh, freaking YouTube is doing its dumb stuff where it hides things from me. Let me try to find this in the interim. If you could find the super chat, that would be awesome. Let me find that link.
Chat doesn't scroll back far enough.
No, I know about the French stuff. Here it is. Oh, and
So how is everyone finding this conversation so far?
is everyone having a fun time? Yes, this is the citation.
I'm
But
just
I
gonna
also
read
have
a little bit
another
of
one.
Destiny's chat. Aiden is saying Arab Spring / Euromaidan was US backed lol.
I mean, I've been through some of the data, but we go through some more. I will post, however, some of the stuff about the. This is on Gaddafi and Libya, and then the other one on Gaddafi and Libya.
So to Nerve Renders, who's in Destiny's chat, who's asking what's going on right now, Destiny is gone for a couple of minutes, so
Yeah.
we're just filling the air. To the Arab Spring point,
I was just reading this as well.
Peter Zahan, in his book Disunited Nations, I think, or well, he said somewhere that that was caused largely by spike in food prices, which tripled because Russia banned exports of wheat because of some domestic stuff, which caused a poor harvest, and so people literally couldn't eat, so they saw the need to do something about it, hence the revolution. People are telling me that this isn't actually Destiny's chat. I guess it's fair.
Well, who's playing Tetris? It's Spoon. He's playing Tetris, but on our side. But yeah, guys, from Destiny's side of things, I hope things are chill. This was supposed to be a pleasant conversation. I know people can get aggressive.
It seems to be. I'm just picking out things that would spark conversation.
Yeah, this is not meant to be aggressive in any way. I hope that's coming through. That even if we disagree, that this is what I wish more political conversation was like, honestly. So, because I found this to be productive. Because for me at least, I wrote this as a discussion in my description because I could be wrong. I mean, I have a bunch of research and a bunch of data, but I could be wrong. So, and that's I think the stance to take on these things. So, just personally.
Aiden gives more attention to YT chat than Tiny does. I'm not sure who Tiny is, but it seems to be true.
It diminutive, literally word for Destiny.
Tiny?
It's a rude nickname for Destiny.
Right, fuck shit.
Huh?
I'm here.
Oh, Kizza, what's up? Real quick, I didn't know what was going on.
Well, I spent about like 5 super chat. But I sent about 5 super chats and you missed about 3 of them.
I didn't see any of them. Let me hang on. We'll get into it. I don't know what happened.
This one's from 80 minutes ago.
Okay, hang on.
Also, I DM'd you something from Destiny's YouTube chat.
You sent me a Times.uk article.
The first one was about BLM.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that's a thing. So in case no one saw this, because we're streaming to like 4,000 Destiny fans, BLM co-founder admits using mentioned. Wait. BLM co-founder admits using mentioned bot with donations.
Dun, dun, dun.
Headline.
Yes.
Also, you said that Destiny, you forgot the WikiLeaks exposing the DNC in 2016 and the USA bragging about rigging the Russian election in 96. Time magazine admitted to this. Yeah, sorry about missing those chats, because they don't. I have to like go back into the back end on my side to pull.
Oh, like I said, And this is why I wanted you to delay this by an hour.
Well, well, it is what it is. I think it's been productive. I don't know. That's just my personal opinion.
Chat disagrees with you.
Really? I think it's been a productive conversation.
I'll put it this way: me using sandpaper to take off the paint of an old Lincoln is more productive.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Let's put it this way: this is way more cool and cordial than most conversations about Ukraine.
Yes, I've enjoyed it.
But yes, but that's because one side's fucking retarded about anything outside of their fucking state.
Well, disavow, but
I mean, it's a fact.
I didn't get it even.
Oh well. I think I don't know how much else we have to go. Oh, yeah, I do know what we have to go through. We have to go through the Hunter Biden stuff. That's gonna be I think probably the final.
So even Destiny YouTube chat kind of agrees with it being productive. So I guess that's a positive.
Oh, bullshit on.
Also, whoever said that Russia Sims are on this side, I disavow. Destiny chat in YouTube? No. Incorrect.
Sorry. To Destiny's chat, half you cunts are ultimately Russians because you ultimately followed the same politics as them. So kindly pipe the fuck down. That's a fact. It's a fact.
Please.
If you follow Marxism, you're ultimately a Russian simp.
Wow.
Disavow. One sec.
God, that's so unreadable. Jesus Christ.
Okay.
I'm question marking you, Izza.
I do think the last thing to go over though is the Hunter Biden stuff because
I will say I'm grateful that Destiny straight up. I will say I do find it funny that he straight up admits that he would not be comfortable with Russia having military bases on Mexico and Canada. Doesn't see why Russia would have issues with U.S. military bases.
There aren't any. There aren't any.
Arthur. The point is, would he be uncomfortable with it? Which he said yes.
Who cares? How is that analogous?
The point is to point out the stupidity in this argument, saying, "Oh, why would Russia respond?" It's like if you have military bases right on your fucking doorstep, you're not just sit there and say, "Oh yeah, cool, you can sit there." You're gonna think, "Hell, fucking no." I bet you can see the agreements we know of from declassified documents from the 80s and 90s.
Wait.
But then again,
Russia is uncomfortable because there is a possibility of the United States putting a military base in Ukraine. Is what you're saying?
My point being is that there was official agreements back in the 80s and 90s about no advancement eastwards. This was violated, and Russia has been consistently
marching closer
and closer to the door.
It actually hasn't been violated in any way, shape, or form.
They already had agreements. We already went over this weeks ago. If it's documented, it's been agreed.
Do I need to stream my desktop to show you that there hasn't been any NATO military expansion? Because I have a handy map of all military installations in a bunch of countries.
It doesn't
from satellite imagery.
Debate has occurred within the debate, so I don't know. Wait till Destiny.
Berlin is more west than fucking Poland than that.
Recent election and the
the most popular president ever
of the Bidens. If you're alright with that.
Which involvement into what?
In terms of Burisma.
Oh, actually, before that, since you missed it, Destiny, are you aware that the WikiLeaks were the ones who revealed the crap with the DNC in 2016? And the United States straight up admitted through Times Magazine that they interfered with the 1996 Russian election.
Well, firstly, so WikiLeaks was the one that linked it, but the hacker that initially penetrated the DNC was Russian, the Guccifer hacker. But I'm aware that WikiLeaks is the one that was publishing it, of course. Secondly, what do you mean the U.S. admitted to interfering in the election? What do you mean by that?
Times Magazine did a great piece where they straight up bragged about, quote-unquote, fortifying the 96 election in Russia. That's where what's his name? Boris Yeltsin? Yeah, him. Yeltsin became election. I'll find the article. Magazine.
I think I would have heard about this, and I haven't.
No, I
given my background.
I sent Aiden the picture that she couldn't believe this as well. July 15th, 1996. On cover.
Yeah,
Against the rescue.
Wait. Can you link me this? I just want to read it.
Sorry about my fucking last truck.
Gladly, right here. Okay, apparently it could not be delivered.
Oh wait, can you just link it in the
Podcast live chat.
Yeah, podcast live chat.
Okay, sure thing.
Or the absolutely private stream chat.
Right there.
For the us here.
Okay. This is the cover. Can I read the cover story? Hold on.
I haven't read this either, by the way.
Secret Service, how 4 U.S. advisors used polls, focus groups, and negative ads and all the other techniques of American campaigning to help Boris Yeltsin win. Okay, what is the issue here?
I would dare say that's blatant foreign interference of an election by the U.S. government.
Okay, I'm going to ask one more time. Why do you think that I think that Russian interference in the U.S. election was bad?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that
Well, no, but I just want to know...
My point is, the United States is bitching about Russian interference, despite the fact that was a proven nothing burger admitted by Fan Jones of CNN. The United States has a long history.
Nothing you're saying is true. Okay, so it wasn't a nothing burger. There was an agency that was operating within U.S. borders that was lying about what it was, that was actually being controlled by foreign Russians, right? That was the issue. Now, did this happen in Russia?
Admitted this.
What?
CNN straight up admitted it was a nothing burger.
I don't know what CNN is. I don't care about CNN. I'm reading the actual indictments from the Mueller investigation. I don't give a fuck what some random pundit on CNN says. Why would I care about that, right? I'm looking at the actual investigation, right? You can go through all the Mueller indictments if you don't. What was based on nothing? Do you think that the IRA? Do you think all of those indictments are fake, or what do you mean based on nothing?
There have been confirmed reports that
when Van Jones was questioned,
intelligence has penetrated DNC.
Hold on, there's two people talking at the same time. What?
Sorry.
Arthur.
There have been confirmed reports that Russian intelligence has penetrated the DNC, at the very least.
Yeah, that was true. So, what is the nothing burger? What do you mean?
Van Jones of CNN straight up admitted that Trump Russiagate was a nothing burger.
That's different. That's Trump Russiagate.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that necessarily has to do with the current conversation. I mean, I agree that there's an issue there, but
I guess it's confusing.
Well, I guess we could talk about, and that's what I kind of wanted to move into anyway. And I'm sorry because I think I'm gonna, so we can go forward with it. If you have any last couple thoughts on this before we move forward to talk about, probably.
Yeah, I guess. So real quick for this, like the United States being in support of Yeltsin, I don't think there was anything illegal or horrible. Or I'm just going through this article. I don't think anything like foreign leaders helping each other, as long like if there's no like covert action going on where there are these like foreign state-controlled interests that are obscuring themselves in other countries. Like that's the issue with the foreign Russian interference. That's why people were upset about it. Well, I mean, I'm sure some people were upset about it for dumb reasons, but like that was the illegality. That was the challenge there. But the idea that like the United States supported Yeltsin more than whoever the fuck he was running against, like that's not like a conspiracy or a bad thing. Like world leaders prefer other world leaders all the time. Like
difference between to offer devil's advocate position here.
Yeah. So
there's a difference between just supporting and there's also like campaigning in favor of someone or stuffing ballot boxes or doing, those kinds of things.
Sure.
On that basis, though, and sorry, because me you so we can get through this for a little bit. Sorry. So I think going off of that kind of basis, I was not familiar with what he was talking about there in terms of that particular thing about Yeltsin. But what I think is interesting maybe is some of the post Euromaidan kind of interactions involving the Biden administration, well, the Obama administration involving the Bidens, right? And I'm not sure how much you're aware of that, but I would imagine to a fairly good degree.
Sure, a bit.
So, if nothing else that we've talked about beforehand gives any indication that there was some kind of, let's just say U.S. governmental support of certain elements of the Ukrainian government over others. Oh, and sorry, before I forget, I did want to bring up that you mentioned the snipers, right?
Uh-huh.
In the Euromaidan?
Yeah.
So, someone from, her name is Dr. Olga Bolgomets, and
yeah.
Now, hang on.
Tell me what Dr. Olga said. Go ahead.
Dr. Olga Bolgomets said that someone from the new coalition was responsible, and that the bullets had the handwriting of the new coalition. Now, why I bring this up is that she was not part of the previous coalition. She was not fond of the Yanukovych regime that was being overthrown during the Euromaidan. She was, in fact, explicitly antithetical to Yanukovych. And yet
so here, I'm just going to link this in the live chat. Like, it's inarguable that it's inarguable that police that were part of the big crew, what the fuck were they called? There's a name for the special police or whatever of the government, were shooting and killing protesters. This video will walk through some of the 3D evidence. It'll talk about how an independent organization.
I've been through the 3D evidence as well, but
yeah,
her testimony says that she thinks that they were not the people who the snipe. We've seen this. Sorry, I'm going to mute you. Sorry. Is that they her personal analysis, and again, she's not favorable towards the regime that was being blamed for this. She was in fact antithetical and running against that regime.
Yeah, but I don't care what her personal testimony is. It means nothing to me. Was she there, or like, what, does she see every single shot? Like, I don't care.
She helped work on the autopsies. Yeah.
I don't care about that though.
How can she know that those bullets were specifically from this or that side of the protest?
That was her testimony.
But that I would rather see rather than the testimony of somebody doing autopsies, I want people that are like working on video footage from multiple points that are reconstructing the environment and then like tracing shots from video to video. Like, this is going to be way more reliable than one person's testimony, than Olga's testimony during an autopsy, right?
Over, she can't know that.
Well, I'm also just saying that this person is not motivated to.
Yeah, that's great, but they might just be wrong. Like, I don't care whether, like, I'm not, like, you can find a lot of people that aren't motivated that'll give testimony for certain things, but I'm more interested in, like, what are their qualifications for it, right?
Well, her qualifications are that she founded the Bulgametz Institute of Dermatology and Cosmetology, but she's not a cosmetologist inherently. She has a I think PhD. I think I have her. She has a degree in general medicine and a medical degree in skin and venereal diseases.
Sure. I'm sorry. When I say qualifications, I mean like not necessarily her educational background. I mean, like, what is she doing? Like, what's her association with the, like, was she somebody that reconstructed the event, or did she just do an autopsy? Like, because I don't know why I would rely on one person who just does an autopsy, who's a doctor, like, versus somebody that was like involved in like the reconstruction of the shootings or like a broader investigation.
Here's why it's interesting, Destiny, is that Dr. Olga Bulgametz was considered the Euromaidan's queen. That's what it was the name it was given to her. She was considered a major leader in this movement that was in opposition to the Yanukovych regime. Yeah. She was in favor of Yushchenko. So because again, remember the argument being made here was that the Yanukovych regime, which was on the way out, which was being protested during the Euromaidan, that Yanukovych had hired snipers or had used the Ukrainian government or Ukrainian military to kill people in the Euromaidan. And this woman who does not like Yanukovych is working against him and is working for the Yushchenko, or going and becomes involved later in the Yushchenko government and is the Euromaidan's queen. She's saying, even from her own biased perspective, it does not look like the Yanukovych government funded this. But then, like, what's the evidence? So what she's saying, that like bullets had handwriting on them saying, by the way, this came from the protesters? Like, what? No, not a literal handwriting. I think she was saying that the style of the bullet or whatever. I don't know but that's her testimony. So
there was vague, nebulous evidence that this was fired from.
Yeah, if you want, I'm curious.
Russian gun.
Like, link me the thing if you want. Like, a bullet is a bullet. Like, I don't think you can tell what gun a bullet came from. I'm curious.
Yes, you can absolutely. That's how we find. No, that's how we find murderers in some cases, because the drilling holes of certain guns, you can certainly line those up with individual bullet patterns. So I don't know how.
Hold on, like, if you have two of the same rifle and they both fire a bullet, I don't know if you can tell like which rifle the bullet came from.
I actually think that you can. That's how we're able to determine a lot of homicides. But Olga Bulgametz.
Okay.
Well, but I'll have to find it.
Yeah, if you can read me her thing, I'm curious on what.
There are people yelling at Destiny saying that ballistics exist. And ballistics.
Ballistic doesn't refer to going to a CIA lab and pushing a button and scanning it and saying it came from, like, a ballistic is going to measure, like, when we talk about ballistics, we're measuring all sorts of different things when we talk about that. I know that there are striations where certain rifles can mark a certain bullet, but I don't know if that's like individually unique from like will two AK-47s always produce like a 100% traceable unique different bullet? I don't know if that's the case or not.
Moreover, you're not going to be able to prove ideology of the person shooting it, right?
Well, if you can get both guns and know who had both guns, possibly, but...
Possibly, yeah.
But there are a lot of guns.
But I'd be curious to see what her testimony says, because like you can literally watch, like I said, like in this article I linked, like you can watch the video between like 4 different places. You can see very, very clearly that a police officer is shooting at and killing a protester. Like there's not really much left up for interpretation.
Oh, I've seen it.
Wait, then what's the disagreement?
The disagreement is who were the snipers?
Well, but they were police. They were in police uniforms with police officers in.
But were they state sponsored? Were they from the Yanukovych regime?
Yeah, they were wearing the police uniforms and everything. Unless, do we really think that like somehow like protesters like snuck in?
Or from was it from the Yushchenko regime?
Yeah, they were wearing the police uniforms. Yeah, unless.
But hang on, because the Yushchenko, it was blamed on the Yanukovych regime, but she's saying as part of the Yushchenko. Not in favor of the Yanukovych regime, that she says it looks like it is not part. Even though she was against the Yanukovych regime, she's saying, and I posted in this Baltic Times, I think this is it, that she did not think it looked like it came from the previous regime.
Okay, let me read this real quick. Okay, hold on.
Sure.
Estonian, blah, 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 foreign committee chairman, blah, blah, blah. So the March 5th, the phone call recording. It's linked to YouTube.
We skipped down to says like Olga, and this was in her call with Minister Piet of Hungary.
A phone call recording was leaked to YouTube on Wednesday, where Foreign Minister Pate speaks of his recent visit to Ukraine with Ashton, where Pate notes that the snipers who killed people in Kiev could have been commissioned by the new coalition. Pate cites in the phone call that took place on February 26 citizen activist Olga Bogomolets, who told Pate that the same snipers shot in Maidan both the Ukrainian police forces and rebels. Olga said that all evidence suggests that the snipers who shot the policemen and people were the same, said Pate. She showed me photos also and said that as a medical expert, she can say it is the same signature. That doesn't mean anything to me. I don't know what that...
Well, I'm just reporting, this is the data that she presented. And she's, again...
Well, that's not data. This is like a part of a phone. This is literally hearsay. Like, he's reporting on something that somebody else said where they said she saw photos.
Sure,
like,
it's hearsay, but Pate is saying that she showed him medical evidence, right?
I don't know if
that's
photos...
true or not. I don't know if that's true or not, but she's saying...
Well, just initially we were saying that she was doing autopsies and like ballistics analysis, and now we're at she showed me photos and said as a medical expert.
I believe she did, and she is a medical doctor.
Sure, but like, was she actually performing autopsies here, or?
I believe so. I could be wrong, but it's hard to tell in some of these instances. That's what she claims.
Okay.
I don't know.
Sure. I mean, like, I'm pretty confident, or I'm 100% confident that Yanukovych's police were shooting at protesters. Pretty sure that's why he ran away from the country, because he knew that if he stayed, he was going to get fucked for making the orders.
Yeah.
No, what?
I mean, very, very possible, but it's interesting that this person who is not in favor of Yanukovych is...
You're harping on that a lot. That doesn't mean anything. They could have a million different motivations, or they could just be wrong, right? Like, I can't just show you something, oh, look, this person is motivated not to do a thing, so therefore it must be true. This is like, it's like learning how to tell like a level 1 lie, where like, oh, yesterday, the reason why I ran away from you at the restaurant, it's not because I was cheating on you, it's because I pooped myself. And I'm telling you the truth, because like, why would I ever admit to something so embarrassing, LOL? Like, that's not like, that saying that they're not like ideologically predisposed in one way or another is not evidence that their testimony or analysis is good or valid, right?
I actually agree 100%. So sure. Yeah, I'd agree with that. I do think it's strange. I think it's unusual that this person who is, and not just somebody who is like against the Yanukovych regime, who is very outspokenly against the Yanukovych regime, and she determines from her medical analysis that it was not attributable to the Yanukovych regime. We've all seen no, maybe not we've all, but I've seen the video also of the snipers just killing people in the streets of Euromaidan. So that the fact that it happened is unquestionable, but who was paying for and who was saying the snipers is a question.
To make such a claim, you must give me evidence linking a given bullet, which caused a given wound, to a given gun, to a given person, to a given organization. That's 4 steps. You haven't done any of those. You've just cited one person who said something.
And it also seems like as well that like so if you're going to do this analysis, I'm just reading because I'm not aware of this. Apparently, it is possible. It might be possible to match a specific bullet literally to a specific, not even a model rifle, to a specific rifle, but you need you have to recover the original rifle, and the bullet has to be recovered intact. Well, did anybody get the rifles from the snipers? Is that a thing?
No, I don't believe she did. So again,
well, then how does she even know this, right?
It is a question. Again, with a lot of this stuff, I'm providing the evidence that I've been able to find where I think that it raises questions. However, with a lot of this stuff, as we've said repeatedly, is that you're talking about fog of war and you're talking about countries that are highly...
Well, sure, but again, there is no fog of war when it comes to police officers shooting protesters. There's like tons of people. There's not. We've got video. It's 2014. Everybody has cell phones taking videos of everything. There is no fog of war. We can see security footage camera of the police officers in their distinct little yellow uniforms shooting. We can look at 100 other videos in the area, measure the sound and everything to figure out like who was standing where, what was shot when, and then we can see a protester fall to the ground and then look at the autopsy report and go like, that bullet came from that police officer behind that barricade in that uniform at that specific point of time, and it hit that protester that you can see in like 7 different cell phone videos. Absolutely. Like, it's like inarguable. Like, I'm going to take that evidence over Olga said in a call maybe to somebody that she saw a picture of a guy and she knows that the bullet came from a sniper ordered by
it's in a call to Estonian Foreign Minister Urmas Paet and chief of EU Foreign Affairs Catherine Ashton that she said this. So.
She might have said it, but it sounds like, I don't even know if she did an autopsy. It definitely sounds like she didn't recover an untouched bullet, and it definitely sounds like she didn't recover a rifle that it came from. So I don't care at this point, her qualifications need to be divine in order to actually sustain anything she said. Yeah, sorry.
That's fine. That's fine then. Okay, let's put it that way. Let's say that we cannot. Well, then what's the evidence that it was definitely the Yanukovych regime?
I linked you a thing. You can look at we can watch the videos if you want. Like, you can see the bullets coming from. Yeah.
I mean, I know I've seen it, but where's the evidence that was Yanukovych rather than Yushchenko?
Because Yanukovych was the one who was in charge of those police at the time. They're literally like his special guard.
But Yushchenko was coming in at the same time.
Pardon me.
No, wait.
But Destiny's robot.
I might be wrong. I don't think Yushchenko wasn't coming in until Yanukovych fled the country.
Destiny, you're roboting.
It was during the Euromaidan. This happens during the Euromaidan, where they are overthrowing Yanukovych and Yushchenko.
Wait, hold on. Wait. That is not true. The Euromaidan was not overthrowing Yanukovych. The Euromaidan was a long series of protests that were happening for months and months. The revolution didn't happen until
in December, up until about May. Until
Yanukovych isn't ousted until there's like 100 people killed over the course of a few days.
Yeah,
where protesters are being shot and killed. Right? Yeah. That's when he left. So Euromaidan wasn't all about trying to overthrow or kick him out. There were a few days, I think there are names for these, but there were a few days where the violence escalated to massive levels, and then police were shooting on protesters and people realized it. That's when Yanukovych left.
Well, certainly because that was a terrible look. And if you're Yanukovych, let's put it to this kind of perception. If you are Yanukovych and you are being overthrown, essentially,
he wasn't being overthrown, though. There were just a lot of protests. Nobody was talking about overthrowing him. He fled the country. That's why he got quote unquote overthrown.
That was the desire of the Euromaidan.
No, absolutely not.
What do you think? What was the point of the Euromaidan then?
They were protesting huge corruption in Ukraine, and they were protesting him walking
the
away.
Of Yanukovych.
No, I don't think that election was disputed. There was an earlier one in 2004. No,
it was the 2004, and then he got elected again after that when there was no dispute.
In 20, but the protest, the Euromaidan protests, I don't believe were over the legitimacy of the election.
That was over the legitimacy of him pulling out of a more pro-NATO, pro-EU deal and moving towards Russia. Yes,
that was part of it. Yes, but it wasn't. They didn't say that he was like an illegitimate leader. That like the election was fake. I don't think he would have been. I don't think he would have been ousted. Like maybe, but like it's hard to say. But like the reason why he fled was because of the cops shooting at people. That's why he fled the country. Because the Euromaidan had been going on, like you said, for months.
It had been, but
Like, why did he flee when he fled? What happened?
after the snipers, the snipers,
Yeah.
you know.
So that's when he fled. So, but the protest has been happening for months and months and months, right? So he only fled because police were shooting at protesters, and then with that level of violence was like unseen, I think, across like most of Europe for like an established country.
But
like,
if that was something that he just theoretically, if that was something he ordered his government to do, why would he then flee when it happened?
Either because it looked really bad, because the protests got worse and worse, because I mean, I don't know, controlling crowds is hard, and people fuck up sometimes, but
all possible. I think that these are possible alternatives.
But wait, why do you think he fled?
Because I think he got set up.
But you have literally zero evidence to believe that.
Only Dr. Bulgametz's data.
The Olga girl who you hearsay stuff in a phone call about?
I'm basing it off of her analysis.
You can't even tell me what her analysis was, right? Like, what was her analysis?
Based on what she said to Pate and Ashton.
Yeah, read that. Read what she said. We can go back. We can go and read what she said to them.
She said it was someone from the Nuke coalition, and that this information had been conferred to them based on the findings of Olga Bulgametz, who stated that the bullets used by the snipers had, quote, the same kind of handwriting. It is important to note that Dr. Bulgametz did not appear fond of the Yanukovych regime, as she has not only personally participated in the Euromaidan protests, but encouraged her students to as well. There's evidence of that. While it has been reported.
Wait. I'm reading this Baltic Times article you linked me. What are you reading from?
Oh, my own notes.
Okay, well, hold on, because your own notes. So I'll read what it says here. So it is, quote, Olga said that all evidence suggests that the snipers who shot the policemen and people were the same, end quote, said Pate. Quote,
it's the same
she showed me, I don't know where you're getting handwriting from. Hold on.
She said if you'd like to listen to the entire phone call, it's recorded, so.
Okay, well, the other quote is, she showed me photos also and said that as a medical expert, she can say that it is the same signature. Signature here doesn't refer to handwriting, right?
Oh, sorry, signature handwriting, sorry, yeah.
Well, this isn't handwriting. Signature is like a broader term for like a certain type of ballistic thing. You could say, well, look at the signature, it's similar. Like there's a exit wounds or sure. So, but again, I don't. What is the evidence? Like, how do you believe there's nothing?
Well, I don't know. She's the one person that we've heard give any kind of a report on this.
But there's no report. No, we don't have a report. Wait, hold on. When I say hearsay, but the reason why hearsay is bad in a court of law is because hearsay is when somebody says that somebody else said something, and you, as an accused, don't have the opportunity to question that accuser. When you're fundamental rights,
You're right.
So I don't know what her testimony is, and if it's just like hearsay, I don't know if she believes this or what even like.
Well, no, you're completely correct on that. In that, what we know about Bogolomet's report was as it was repeated to Peyton Ashton in their private phone call. But that's what was told to Jeffrey Pate, or Irma Pate, I mean. Was that's what she told him. So yeah, that is hearsay. You're correct on that. So I don't know.
But, I'm just saying. I'm curious. Like, is there like an article where she talks about this, or where anything?
No. It's recorded phone call. That's where this is coming from. No, but the reason I brought this up is because you seemed very convinced that it was definitely the Ukrainian government who had done this, and under the or maybe the Russian government even. My contention there was that there seems to be some evidence, at least from this one doctor who has a very high position within the Ukrainian government, by the way, who seemed to disagree. That's why I bring it up. Does that make sense?
It's just but it's just not.
Well,
there's no evidence. It's like I can't even disagree with it. It's like
what else were we supposed to do? So you said earlier though that you were pretty convinced, or you seemed to be to me. I could have misinterpreted that you thought that that the Ukrainian government or the Russian government, could you reiterate which one you thought it was?
The Ukrainian government's police were firing on protesters.
Okay.
I know that to be true, 100%.
I agree with. There's no disagreement there.
Okay.
It's who was in command of the Ukrainian police at the time. That's the question.
No, it's not a question. It was Yanukovych, certainly, with certainty.
I mean, again, this is the evidence to the
They
contrary.
were protecting him from protesters. That's literally okay. Here, okay. I'm curious because now
you don't have to believe it. I'm just saying that is the evidence to the contrary. If you don't.
Okay, so here's I don't know if I have
understand
no idea what this website is. Okay, because I'm googling around to try to see if she's
Ghost Archive. Not sure.
So Olga Bogolomets, I don't know how to pronounce it, said that she had
I
told.
pronounce it wrong constantly. Don't worry.
Sir, she said that she had not told Mr. Pate that policemen and protesters had been killed in the same manner. Quote, myself, I saw only protesters. I do not know the types of wounds suffered by military police, she told the Telegraph. I have no access to those people. So it sounds like she doesn't even...
Article is from
Telegraph article. It's just an article. So that's fine. I'll find this on YouTube real quick.
I'm just reading, so maybe this will disprove me because I'm really there. But so okay, but she said she had asked for a full forensic criminal investigation into the deaths that occurred in the Maidan. Quote: no one who just sees the wounds when treating the victims can make a determination about the types of weapons. I hope international experts and Ukrainian investigators will make a determination of what type of weapons, who was involved in the killings, and how it was done. I have no data to prove anything.
Yeah,
I was a doctor helping to save people on the square. There were 15 people killed on the first day by snipers. They were shot directly to the heart, brain, and arteries. There were more than 40 the next day. 12 of them died in my arms. So it sounds like she has no idea about any of this. She just saw people being, yeah.
So I don't know either, but all I'm saying is that this is what was recorded. I posted the YouTube video that has the entire leaked call between Ermis Pate and Catherine Ashton and their discussion on it. So
gotcha. So this is a leaked phone call. So Pate might literally just be misunderstanding what was said. If I'm to look now,
he's the Estonian PM, so it's possible that he misunderstood. But that's what she told him, right?
Well, we don't know if that's what she. That's what he's saying he heard.
That's what he. Yes, sure. That's what he's saying he heard. So, and a lot of this is going to be hearsay, unfortunately.
No, it's not. Hold on. The analysis, the 3D reconstructions, and the cell phone videos. None of that is hearsay. That's literally direct evidence.
If that exists, that they did 3D reconstructions, yeah.
It does. That's what I like. That was the whole. There's a whole New York Times video you can watch. You can click on the thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're good. I don't like to the equivocation here that the evidence is like whatever. No, not even the Ghost Archive. So like here's this New York Times thing. Okay.
Okay.
Like you can scroll down. There's like a 3-minute video that you can watch.
Who killed the camp protesters?
All right. And you can see like a whole 3D reconstruction. You can see them pulling from like 10 or 15 different cell phone videos to like look at the thing. You can see the shots before and after, where they came from. Yeah.
That's fine. But the question is, who were they?
They were police. They have their little, they literally wear like little yellow fucking, like, they're the police. There's not a question about it. What do you mean?
And that can't be manipulated. That can't be someone pretending to look like the police.
No, they're firing from police-controlled areas with other police officers. Unless we literally think that they're like, I would have to write a whole movie script to tell you how this was with the police. It would have to be a grand conspiracy to do this.
I have seen some of this, but I'm not sure. Then I don't know.
Okay, but like now, okay, so I'm gonna push into this a little hard. Okay.
Sure thing.
You see that it makes me wonder now in your head, because you were very quick to accept a leaked phone call where one man reports that one woman that we don't have any more information on said.
Well, I looked into her a bunch, but yeah.
No. When I say more information on, I mean we don't know what her involvement was, and it seems like you weren't aware of that because you thought that she was performing autopsies when she's saying she doesn't have any data at all, right? All she did was she saw people get shot.
Yeah, I was incorrect about that. You're right.
Sure, but I mean, but you were quick to believe that. Well, look, this is like decent evidence of something weird is going on. But when I can show you video footage of cops with other cops standing in cop-controlled areas shooting protesters and dying, now it's like, well, I don't know. There could be a lot of stuff going on here. Like this evidence is 1,000,000 times stronger than the evidence you presented to the contrary. But now we've like took a very skeptical position of it. I don't know. It just is a little bit strange to me.
Oh, it's strange to you that I'm willing to change my position based on evidence I have.
Well, yeah, because your position went from being pretty sure that something happened on the other end to now being completely undecided. When I feel like the evidence on my side is like 1,000,000 times stronger.
Oh, but that's why I thought we were having this conversation was because I don't know everything.
Sure, that's fine. Okay, I understand that. I feel questionable when people believe certain things sometimes, but yeah, okay, sure.
Oh, no. I literally, the reason why I thought it would be interesting to discuss this is because most of the other discussions I've had about this topic have been kind of like heavily emotional and not very data-based. And sure. I think that's a way... I didn't know about this, so that to me... And I spent 2 months working on the research for this, and I have pages and pages and pages, but I haven't seen that aspect. So
Sure.
I do appreciate
Okay.
that, and it seems to, I have to look more into it, but to me it seems to be accurate from what I'm looking at here.
Gotcha.
Also,
All right.
Aiden, who do you think leaked the phone call?
I don't know. Between Newland and Piat, or Ashton and Pate, I don't know who leaked these
Either
phone
one of
calls.
those.
Well, there
I'm
might have been. I don't know.
I'm inferring that it was the Russian intelligence.
Yeah, of course.
That's probably the most likely one. The only other thing that I think to
Which
bring up
raises
then
a
here,
question:
and
why would they leak those phone calls?
I think actually I wanted to bring up that bit, and
Mhm.
you've given me good doubt on the Vologomets bit, because
Sure.
to me that seemed reasonable,
Mhm.
but now I've got doubts about it. So, what do you think though about the involvement of Hunter Biden in Burisma?
I need to do like a full day if I want to prepare for that conversation. But just like
Okay.
briefly and looking into it, I'd never found like strong evidence that anything wrong happened. It feels like almost every claim is made on like very scant readings of like different email things. Where just like with the Newland calls, people are trying to say like, oh, like Hunter talked about the big man, so that means that Biden literally single-handedly rigged everything. When it could just as easily be read as like, oh, like it sounds like he probably talks to his dad, and his dad probably can pull some strings because he's a fucking vice president, of course. And then like people will say things like, oh, why was Hunter Biden even on that board? And it's like, bro, like I'm pretty sure Hunter Biden has served on a ton of different boards for other countries' boards. It's like he didn't need to be like a fucking engineer to serve on a board for Burisma or whatever. It's not like he like, yeah. And then I don't think there was any connection
Why was he
whatsoever to that
serving on
prosecutor.
at all? Because
Why was he what?
within their internal emails, they said basically the reason. But I'm not talking about the big man stuff. They said the reason in the emails was for him to try and work out trade deals, or excuse me, they didn't say that specifically. Was to use his resources and his connections to help out Burisma, which is of course is a Ukrainian energy company.
Mhm.
And to me, and they were paying him $80,000 a month to do that.
Okay.
In a country where the average monthly earning is something like $1,000, right?
Sure.
Less, way less.
You're describing like every single like big corporate board
Sure.
ever. Like I don't know
Sure.
where's the problem?
Well-
What's the bad thing?
Well, my issue is that do you think that Hunter Biden had any again? Well, you kind of explicated it, but I think that Hunter Biden and his involvement with the board on Burisma, specifically an energy company, was evidence of the United States getting involved in a place where it shouldn't have been involved, not directly but indirectly.
Wait, how? What do you mean? Like U.S. people are going to be involved in countries all over the world? What do you mean? Like, are we not allowed to do business in any other country? Like,
to me, it seems like you're taking an extremely poor country and using it as your piggy bank in order to get your son propped up where he gets paid.
wait, so should countries that have
times-
problems not be allowed to hire any foreign person? And you keep bringing up 80 times.
No.
Like anybody that sits on the board of any massive energy company is probably going to be paid more than the average citizen.
But why was he sitting on? What were his qualifications to sit on the board of an energy?
This guy's literally like a fucking Yale law graduate who probably has a ton of diplomatic connections and shit through his father. Like, he sat on other boards in the past. Like, do you think he was unqualified? Like, I mean, we can look up like Hunter Biden's past dealings. Like,
yeah, I do think
it wouldn't be Hunter Biden's dealings. It would be Joe Biden's dealings then, which is the problem. That's a conflict of interest. Unless Hunter Biden himself goes to.
So in 2008, Biden launched a consultancy company named Seneca Global Advisors that offered to help companies expand into foreign markets. Biden was a partner. They founded an investment advisory firm, Rosemont Seneca Partners. He also co-founded venture capital firm Eudora Global. He held the position of counsel in the law firm of Boies Schiller Flexner LLP. He was on the board of directors of the World Food Program USA, a 501c3 in Washington.
And what are his qualifications for any of these positions other than being Joe Biden's son?
Do you think? I don't know. Hold on, wait. What is the qualifications
of nepotism to me? Do you? I'm shocked.
Wait, what you say as nepotism? First of all, isn't this guy literally a graduate from Yale Law? So I mean, like, it seems like he's a.
How did he get into Yale Law?
Okay, wait, hold on. Where are you? So every single Ivy School graduate is now suspect for every single business dealing they did. Wait, what do you mean? What is the? What?
That's though. Don't misunderstand me.
Wait, hold on. No, wait. You're alleging grand conspiracy now. Okay,
Aiden's alleging grand conspiracy involving 2 people, a drug addict and his
Well,
president's
no,
son.
but now we're literally saying that like his whole like the only like are you saying that like he was a flunky Yale Law, he couldn't do anything, and his dad like got him onto every single one of these boards? People just get paying him money because of like Joe Biden. Like you need to provide evidence of that because you've given me nothing. You're giving me like a trail of breadcrumbs with nothing connecting anything.
Yeah. I can't. Well, no. I would be completely honest. I can't provide you with
Like
evidence.
I'm sure for like if you're gonna tell me that Joe Biden being his dad benefited him through life to some extent,
yes,
yeah, of course.
It did.
Yeah,
Okay,
but
so
that's everything. Yeah. No. Wait.
What
I'm not gonna say that. Yeah.
Is that extent
I mean, like,
legal? Is that extent morally permissible?
morally permissible. This is how the world works. Of course, if you've got well-connected parents, you're going to be a well-connected child. This is true of every single person throughout all of human history.
I agree. It's true.
But
It's
like,
true of Donald Trump Jr.
That's bad.
Everyone.
Wait, how is it bad? What do you mean it's bad? If I go to hire somebody to sit on my fucking board of a company, like I'm going to be looking at like, what are your connections? Where are you from? Who? Like that's part of why you put people on these boards. Of course, that's expected behavior. Now, if we want to argue that like everything should be blind and no one should even know the name of the person to hire, I mean, I guess we can do that. But you're talking about a fundamentally different world. What illegal activity happened here?
Illegal? Purely
yeah, was
illegal?
anything illegal here at all?
Probably nothing illegal. No.
Okay, then wait. Then what's the problem?
If I can use the terminology of the Zoomers, was it some sussy baka shit? A little bit.
Wait, what is sussy? What is sussy baka?
I'm just so happy I got you to say it now.
Like, what do you? Hold on, wait. What do you think boards do?
In terms of what he was specifically hired, it's in the emails between him and
sure, I'll tell you what I think boards do, and you can tell me if I'm off or not, okay? 'Cause I don't know 100%, but my understanding is that when you hire people for a board, these people are usually literally hired for their connections, because you usually can use them to either acquire more capital. They might have some know-how or knowledge of like for it to serve in an advisory role, or they might be able to connect you with other like people or other groups for not just capital reasons, but for business ventures, for cooperation or whatever. This is why people sit on these boards. They're not on the board to like go down on the ground and be an engineer and run the company. So like in terms of like, well, if I want to hire somebody to sit on my board who's a really well-connected person, the president's son, or I'm sorry, it would have been the vice president's son, who also is a Yale grad and also has like history like founding companies and sitting on boards, seems like a pretty good hire, no?
I mean, certainly that would.
How wouldn't that be a conflict of interest between his vice president father and his, business interests?
Where is the conflict of interest?
Well, part of the conflict of interest was the fact that Biden himself was heavily involved in the Euromaidan. Well, not heavily. He was slightly
involved in the Euromaidan. How?
He was involved with U.S. foreign policy towards Ukraine specifically.
Yes, he showed up physically. He showed support towards it.
So Joe Biden, as a representative of like the U.S. government, was being supportive. That like, if we okay, so here for me to believe you, okay,
So
I'm gonna say wait. I'm gonna take away. It's not Daddy. It's the Vice President of the United States representing U.S. foreign policy, right? It's not like Joe Biden was alone in our support for Ukraine.
Yes, he was VP at the time, but he's showing up in Ukraine at these Euromaidan protests. He's also showing up in meetings.
Wait, hold on. Did he show up to protest, or does he have like meetings with leaders and stuff?
No, he showed up at the protests as well.
Yeah, but I mean, what was the purpose of his trip?
He made several trips to Ukraine, actually.
To do what? To do diplomacy,
some of them
like we would expect the vice president to do.
Some of them, as far as I can tell, were just to show up to show support. But obviously, he was working behind the scenes in terms of figuring out who was supposed to be in charge. Was it supposed to be Ola Tiahanibuk? Was it supposed to be Vitaly Klitschko? Was it supposed to be? And John Kerry did the same thing, by the way.
But he's not making any plays to install a leader or do anything like that. You can't show me anything like that. Here's. If we want to say that this
him and John Kerry meeting with Arseniy Yatsenyuk, Vitaly Klitschko, and Ola Tiahanibuk does not show that there's any kind of involvement there politically.
Politically, yes, but that's okay. We get politically involved with other countries. That's fine. But there's a difference between political and
there's a conflict of interest happening. Even if there isn't any
okay, here's what I need to believe, you guys. Hold on, to even have this conversation, I'm sorry. I need you to show me multiple videos that you've done criticizing Trump for literally owning massive properties and deals in other countries, who is the president of the United States, for me to believe that you sincerely care about Hunter Biden's like theoretical conflict of interest here. If you can't show me that, I don't believe you really believe this. I'm full stop there. Do you have those videos?
Do you? We're okay.
I don't believe you. I don't believe you really care about this. Then I think that this is a stretch.
But I do actually really care about it. Okay.
I don't believe you do. I think this is a partisan play.
Now I think you're being unfair.
I don't.
There are
think
people yelling in chat saying that Trump.
A 2-hour-long video about Trump's.
When I see
involvement
so
in
many
foreign countries.
conservatives or Trump supporters like start to go really weird and hard and make all these attacks on Hunter Biden about a conflict of interest, but they've been strangely silent about Trump's massive conflict of interest. That I can't believe.
Massive conflict of interest, if you may.
Owing like was it hundreds of millions or tens of millions of dollars to other countries, having real estate and properties and deals in other countries that he's supposed to be representing U.S. interests against is a massive conflict of interest.
But didn't he not hand all of that over to his son when he became president?
No.
Yes, most of
People are yelling that Trump divested from all his stuff when he was president.
Hold on. First of all, Trump did not divest his businesses, number one. Number two, even if he did hand it over to his son, now we've got another Hunter Biden. Because he literally hired him to work in the government too. Hunter Biden wasn't even employed by Joe Biden. It's like 20 times worse. Like anything you can talk to me about Trump and Kushner or anybody else or Trump Jr. is going to be a million times worse than anything you can try to link like Joe and Hunter to.
Well, I'm not sure about that at all. I'm not sure about that at all.
Give me one example. Give me one thing that you think yeah.
The whole Burisma dealing is, I think, incomprehensible. Now,
which part is incomprehensible?
Once you start to get involved in the firing of the prosecutor, Viktor Shokin, we already both agreed that Viktor Shokin is corrupt. But Biden was pretty clear that he was going to withhold money from Viktor Shokin, using his power as the vice president to withhold that money from Ukraine.
Why was Shokin being? Yeah, but why was Shokin being pushed out of Ukraine?
Because he was investigating Burisma.
No, okay. You should go and read more about Viktor Shokin. That's absolutely no. Hold on. That is absolute. Okay. You're so wrong that this conversation can't be productive.
It's Vadim. Yes, it can't. Okay.
No. Hold on. This conversation is not productive. If you believe that he was pushed out because of Burisma, yeah. This okay. Is there any other?
No. Please educate me then. Why was Shokin pushed out?
Shokin has a massive track record of corruption in Ukraine. Everybody in Ukraine hated him. Everybody in the EU hated him.
Yes, we talked about this.
But it wasn't just because he was investigating Burisma. There's a whole history of this guy in Ukraine as being a corrupt prosecutor.
Well, I'm sure that's possible, but according to his own personal documents that he submitted to the courts over Dmitry Firtash, he said that he was fired because of Burisma involvement.
Wow, the guy that was fired for corruption is trying to claim that he was fired because of corruption? That's your evidence? Really?
I know. I know. I'm just saying. There you go.
Okay.
Well, believe what you want. I'm just saying that's his counter argument.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. There are people that rape kids because they say voices in their head are telling them to do it.
God, dude, come on.
Wait, you're seriously going to cite to me the guy that everybody knew was corrupt? You're saying that he's saying, well, the other people were corrupt. That's your evidence to the contrary? I
mean, my argument is that I think that everybody pretty much involved in all of this was corrupt. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, do you not agree that the corruption in this is endemic?
I don't think there was anything corrupt about Hunter Biden serving on the board of Burisma. I think he had the qualifications and the connections to serve. It was all declared openly, right, to the U.S. State Department. Like all of these things are filed about, which, by the way, it was not the case with Trump's. Oh God, what was the name of the guy that got? It starts with an M. It's not Yanukovych because it's fucking. Got kicked out because he was actually doing unregistered secret dealings with the Ukrainian president at the time. Who am I thinking of? Oh my God, guys, this guy was in Trump's Manafort. Yes.
Manafort.
Have you talked anything at all about Manafort, who was doing unregistered activity with the Ukrainian government, who was employed directly by Trump for his party? Because that's another thing that's 50 times worse than what Hunter Biden was doing. But do you have no interest?
I mean, that's probably a matter of perspective, but yeah.
No, it's not a matter. It's a legal perspective, yeah, and a moral perspective, yeah. I don't know what other perspective you can take besides a political one that makes the Hunter Biden one comparable.
Also, Destiny, say we do condemn everything to do with Trump, right? Would you then consider our position to be consistent and then,
Well, no, at that point, then we could have the start of a good faith conversation. But even at that case, no,
wait a minute. Do you think I'm not being good faith?
I think there's a lot of political bias in this conversation. Yes.
Wait, do you really think I'm not being good faith?
I don't know if it's intentional, but I think there's a lot of political bias to make the statement that like the Hunter Biden stuff. Yeah.
Do I have a political bias? Absolutely, I do. I think you also have a political bias, but
I disagree though. But if you show me where I'm being biased or where I'm unequally applying like scrutiny, then I'll gladly admit like, oh yeah, I'm not being.
I have pretty much submitted to every reasonable critique that you've given me for the last 2.5 hours, and I've done that because I'm acting in good faith.
Sure.
I did not come into this in any way to try and have bad faith. I actually would like to be proven wrong, and this is not me being facetious or in any way.
I'm just saying that like when you say that like Hunter Biden was paid above board like $80,000 a month on something, right? But you don't bring up the fact that I'm pretty sure at Manafort's trial, I think federal prosecutors were saying this guy got over $60 million while he was working as an unregistered agent of Yanukovych. How do you miss that but are like fixated on Hunter Biden stuff? That's insane to me. Like Manafort went to federal prison for this stuff. Unless you think all of it was the same and it was like the deep state that put him in jail or something like.
Well, I guess then, okay, let's, how about the Hunter Biden laptop stuff? Do you believe that stuff was correct? That was accurate?
No, Destiny, in the interest
that's where I'm going to move on to now, because if you're saying like this is all bullshit that I'm spewing.
Well, it seems like basically there was a laptop left somewhere that had some personal information from Hunter Biden on it. That seems to be true, yeah. But I don't know if anything ever leaked showed some huge wrongdoing. I mean, we got foot job videos of Hunter Biden. We got some personal messages.
I don't give a single fuck about any of his.
Yeah, but I don't know if anything like I feel like I see like the same 1 or 2 lines circulated where it's like, let me talk to the big man, and people are like, oh my god, that's evidence right there of corruption. But like that could just be him having a convo with his father. But if you think there was something on the laptop that was like ultra incriminating, I mean, yeah, feel free to tell me.
Some of his talks with some of the people in charge of one with Burisma and 2 with Blue Star Strategies. Blue Star Strategies was a firm that was hired by Burisma to basically pick up after Hunter Biden because he made them look worse, even though they ostensibly hired him to make them look better, or not make them look better, but to give them connections, right? And if you don't think there's any problem with that, I can understand that. That there's
what's the problem? What's the problem? Wait, what are we saying? That somebody else got hired because Hunter Biden might have fucked up a job. Like, there's nothing illegal here. There's no wrong.
No, I didn't say there was anything illegal there. I'm saying that, like, yeah, the Bidens were, however, benefiting from Hunter's relationship with his father. To be able to
I imagine every single. Have you ever heard of like the Clintons or the Kennedys? Like every single person benefits from relationships with people. Yeah, of course. Or the Trumps. Like,
all of those things are bad.
No, they're not necessarily bad. It's how the world works. If you're going to hire somebody to do something, it's going to be somebody that probably has firsthand or at the very least secondhand experience in your field. We can talk about video games if we want, right? Like when you go to or we can talk about real sports, right? Athletic coordinators and defensive quarterback and all these people, like these people that are working on sports teams, oftentimes are people, believe it or not, that are either working on other sports teams or played sports. Like, oh my God, isn't it so corrupt that this NFL like defensive coordinator was also like a a Division I football player, right? Like, yeah, of course it's going to be, or in esports, right? Like, I can't believe this guy is a coach on this team, but he used to be the owner of another team, or this owner of this team was actually a player on that team, or played ladder on this team, or worked for Riot Games. Like, yeah, it's always going to be the case that people that have the most experience in these fields are shuffling around in different companies and whatnot. It's not like you're gonna be like,
I don't think Hunter Biden had very much experience besides.
We literally just showed that you were wrong. He's a graduate from Yale Law, and he's had like multiple companies that he's either founded or served on the board of, and he in the past. Like,
have you looked at the?
Why wouldn't that be all driven by the same?
You might want to.
Why wouldn't that be driven by the motive of people wanting to get access to his father? It's not his qualifications; it's his father.
Even if I say that was the case, a wrong we have not found. Like, people getting access to other people is oftentimes why people sit on boards. Like that is the case.
In and of itself is wrong, because it creates a conflict of interest for the
to show a conflict of the conflict of interest. You have to show me where somebody is either acting improperly or where there's not like forewarning given beforehand. Because
can we at least admit that it's nepotistic? Can we at least admit that Hunter Biden's positions are?
Yeah, we can say it's nepotistic. Sure, nepotism is is the way that generally all these things work. But nepotism is not illegal or immoral, right?
How isn't it immoral? It might be legal, but it's certainly immoral.
if I want to run a company and I want to hire the best, it's so crazy because I feel like I can't accuse you guys of doing that, although I bet you have. People will say like affirmative action is wrong. You should always hire the best person for the job all the time. Well, if I want to create a board and I want to have people sitting on that board that can help fundraise me the most money or get me the most connected to, like, say, people in Washington, say I'm doing like an arms, I'm working for a private military company or something, a contractor, I'm probably going to be trying to find people, who sat on like the Senate Intel committees or who sat on the judiciary, military, whatever fucking shit. Like, these are the people that I want to hire.
That's their qualification.
What?
Well, sure.
That is their
Nepotism is okay. It's going to happen.
I'm not gonna.
It's kind of inevitable. But is nepotism good? It's not going to necessarily, and I think in probably very few cases, and I'm a freaking monarchist, produce somebody who is going to be the best actor or the best person in some decision making process. And when you look at the things that happened in Ukraine, that's where I have an issue with Hunter Biden's involvement.
Yeah, but what happened in Ukraine? What do you mean? What things happened in Ukraine?
The fact that he got a hell of a lot of money out of this company.
That's everybody that sits on every huge board ever.
If I may finish though, real quick, is that then when he got investigated, and it wasn't just him, that the prosecutor, who yes also was corrupt, then basically the Ukrainian government got paid $1 billion to fire him.
All of Europe was calling for this guy to get fired. Do you think all of Europe wanted Hunter Biden to succeed on the board of Burisma?
No, but when Joe Biden, his father, is explicitly stating it, then I find it to be suspicious. Yeah.
He was the vice president of the United States. That was part of his job. It was like foreign policy. Just like, but you're telling me like if Obama stated it, you'd feel better about it? Wouldn't you just say, well, look, he's covering for the vice president's son? Wouldn't you be saying the same thing?
Yes,
I would argue that Joe Biden should not have been in Ukraine at all.
Okay, so then no family member of anybody that works in government can work on any foreign jobs anymore. That's like where we're going.
No, don't
kind of.
Me.
Okay. Arthur's more honest, so I'm glad Arthur admits it. But yeah, that's essentially what you're saying. You're saying that no person in the U.S. that's related to anybody in government can have any jobs working in foreign countries ever, even if they declare them to the State Department and the other country knows about it and everything. Like,
let's say I'm the vice president of the United States and my son is in Ukraine, I can still do business with China on U.S. matters, but I cannot be in Ukraine. That would be my position.
Okay. I mean, that's a position you can take, but I mean, it's not the current position probably of any country in the world. So I mean, as long as we're acknowledging that, yeah.
Maybe so, but why would that be wrong in any situation? And why is the way the world currently works moral?
Because people that are connected and have experience are going to be put on these boards because they're connected and they have experience. That's just always how it works.
You're just mixing having connections with experience.
I'm sorry, my friend. I'm not trying to personally tag you, okay? But like when it comes to doing business dealings, sometimes connections are literally the only thing that matters. So here's like a thing that'll blow your mind, okay? If you look at some tech companies and you find that they have people like these random like Uber millionaires or billionaires even that sit on their board sometimes, a lot of the time, these board members, they don't even fucking do anything. Basically, these companies will get enough people on their board and they can go to other investors and go, hey, yo, like we've got like Peter Thiel or whatever, fucking he sits on a board. Like, do you want to invest in us? Do you want to sit on the board or whatever? Like, people do this. This is just how this shit works. How these companies work. But like,
that's bad. I mean, all of that's bad.
Okay, then you want to like fundamentally upend, I guess, like capitalist structures or whatever, which is cool. Which is
no. That's meritocracy.
No, there is no such thing. Part of the merit of somebody can literally be the connections they have. If I've got Hunter Biden on my board, I bet that motherfucker can pick up the phone and call almost anybody in Washington that he wants. That's an asset to my company. I don't care if the guy's fucking retarded and a crackhead. Like, I'll hire him to be my board just because I know he can make those phone calls. You can call that like nepotism if you want, but what?
Once he makes the call, that's not nepotism. But if he's like, well, I'm just sitting on this board here, and you make the call, that's your merit, not his.
What do you
see
mean?
What I'm saying? Okay. Qualification of Hunter Biden would be him picking up the phone and getting you a bunch of funding, right?
Sure, or being able to do that, yeah.
His existence in and of itself is not merit. Okay?
No, but I mean, like, his existence being connected to his father... using the term merit is nebulous because what is anything for merit, right? Because Aiden literally says that like him graduating from Yale isn't even merit because his dad got on there, right? Is anything merit like at that point? I'm just saying that like...
hang on. Don't misrepresent me there. Him being able to get into Yale, probably not based on merit necessarily. I think all of us have to be kind of clear about that whether or not you can get into a certain institution is often based on familial background. If your family is paying into the university, you're considered a what's it called? Legacy. And so you do have a
but like we don't even know if that's true, right? Like we don't even know if he got into Yale because of
yeah, you're correct. You're correct on that one, but I would say that generally speaking, when we talk about these powerful families, of which the Bidens
but
are
you're saying
family,
generally, but like does Yale law have a limited space? Like I don't know how many people, like when did he get into Yale law? In
Yale is
1993. Could any congressman get or any senator get their son or daughter into Yale just by their
Biden had
family?
had already been in power for a while, so at that point, I believe. So yeah, I think that's probably because again, what Yale law in particular wants to do is they want to be able to connect their graduates with certain people and with certain outcomes. That's of course what any institution wants to do. So that's not unusual in any way. They're going to want to do that kind of stuff. Do you know what I mean? I don't think that's unusual.
Sure, but I'm just curious if this guy was like a dumb fuck that got into Yale because his dad was. I'm just googling because I'm curious. A person close to Hunter Biden said that he had strong credentials, including an LSAT score that was around Yale law's median.
Where's his LSAT? I'd love to see his LSAT.
Well, supposedly he was around Yale law's median for getting into Yale law. At Yale, he earned editing positions on 2 law journals for receiving his degree in 1996. Like,
in that case, the Yale qualification is fine.
Destiny, like you're obviously a smart guy. You know that, like, just because there are certain criteria that are listed on the university's webpage doesn't mean that it doesn't apply to all individuals of certain levels of power, right?
Sure, I'm sure there are some people, but I'm saying the problem was that when I started listing his qualifications, you were saying that even graduating Yale law doesn't count because he only got in because of his dad. And I'm like, okay, well, at this point, I literally can't show you anything.
If I was that dismissive, then I should.
Okay, sure, that's fine. But I'm saying at that point, I can't give you any, because I can say, well, look, he graduated top of his class in high school, and you go, well, of course he did. His dad was, bought him private tutoring. It's like, okay, well, he was the best little league soccer player ever. And you're like, well, of course, his dad probably paid for a martial arts coach to teach him Shaolin fucking like, I can't tell you anything at that point because you're going to tell me that like everything is like fucked. Like, there's nothing I can say, right?
We might have come off this way, but this isn't the claim we are making.
Sure. Okay, that's fine. I don't know where we're at right now. We're in a rabbit hole.
I think we have fallen down a weird rabbit hole of Hunter Biden, which is it was the end point because that's kind of where we come up to the end of the Ukraine, up until it becomes too modern, in which case, I don't feel comfortable talking about anything that's happened in the last like 2 years because there's too much fog of war. There's too much. Particularly in the last 6 months, right? Where I don't, 4 months in particular.
I don't know what it means when you say there's too much fog of war. I don't know what you mean by that.
In the last 4 months, I don't feel comfortable talking about anything that's happening right now as a definitive, because there is propaganda happening on every single side.
But we can talk about some things differently, right? Like I can show you where Russian troops are, but I can't point to like the ghost of Kiev, right? We can't say that it's all equally foggiest.
Well, the reason I don't make videos
more
on
difficult.
Is because the reason I don't make videos on that kind of stuff is because it changes too rapidly. That's why. If you'd like to talk about it currently on the stream, that's fine. But that's why I haven't made a video and why I haven't done extensive research on what's happening this second.
Sure.
But that's more because things change very quickly during warfare.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, of course.
So why I mostly focus on things going up into 2014 or 2016 is because that's the era where we can kind of look at things. And even then, there's corruption here, so it's difficult to isolate. So, I don't know.
Wait, I just want to ask one, I'm going to 9-year graph. If you think that nepotism is immoral, how can you be a monarchist?
So, I didn't.
Because the new monarchist man.
I didn't say nepotism was immoral. I said nepotism is supposed to be a problem. Arthur, my friend here, said nepotism is immoral. What I think.
And I'm not a monarchist, so I'm fine.
Honest, if you're going to be nepotistic, be overt that you're nepotistic, right? Which is going to be the case in a monarchic system. So, in a monarchic system, we know that nepotism is going to be the case, right? That's the difference. In monarchic systems, we know nepotism is involved. In a democratic system, nepotism is not supposed to be involved. Does that make sense?
Yep.
No, it doesn't. I'm sorry.
What?
How does knowledge of nepotism make it moral? How does that work?
Well, because she's saying that in our current system, nepotism isn't the expectation, right? It would be like if you go, like, let's say that like you're in a room and somebody walks up and like starts touching your boob. We would say that that's immoral. But if you were in like a BDSM club where you sign a form to go in first, well, now it's not immoral because the expectation has changed, right? So in a monarchy, there's an expectation. What?
I don't see how that's analogous.
It's analogous because in a monarchy, nepotism is the expectation, right?
If you're involved in a system where this is the agreed upon system, I mean that's kind of an extreme. But yeah, I think that's not an unfair analogy.
No, okay, sorry. To make it a little more clear, why is nepotism a good thing? And therefore, why is expectation of it justifying it being
in a
good,
monarchic system? I can tell you why. I can tell you in a monarchic system why nepotism is a good thing, and that's because you own the state, and that's because you want to train the next generation to own the state as well and to protect it. But that's
different from a
democratic system where you're not supposed to train your progeny to own the state because they're not supposed to. Inherent, and they often do. We have dynasties in the United States of democratically elected leaders who children become democratically elected leaders and so on for generations. So these are different things. But look, I know that monarchy is a
both of them are bad.
I know, and trust me, I'm sure your chat is having a big fucking lol. But and I understand why it is a big fucking lol. But the monarchic system is just it's a way of trying to figure out how do we solve the problems that we're seeing with republicanism and democracy. And of course, I'm sure as you're aware, Destiny, that Aristotle described all governments as moving in a cycle where monarchy it comes out of despotism,
or that like there's too much power in the executive branch, or that society is going to fall apart. Like, what do you mean by that? Like, that's
again, this is Aristotle's political theory. He thinks that all politics moves in a cycle, and it starts with despotism, which is tyranny. But then kingship, also monarchy, can also be considered tyranny under Aristotle's comprehension. And then it moves into a few rulers under aristocracy and oligarchy, and then into many rulers, which is polity and democracy. But he believes that these things always fall, so that after the fall of democracy, and I'm not Tim pulling you, okay? Like, I'm not gonna go like full. We're about to have a civil war, but if we were to ascribe to Aristotle's idea, I don't know if he's correct or not, is that after democracy will come despotism again. And that will turn into monarchy, which will turn into aristocracy and oligarchy, which will turn into polity and democracy, right? He thinks, at least in his perspective, he thought these things came in cycles.
Sure. I don't know if that's true. I don't have the historical basis to know if that's true, but I mean, if it is, then I guess we'll see it happen, huh?
We'll have to see. My issues with democracy is that I do not think that democracy actually allows for maximization of human freedom, and that's why I came to reject democracy.
Okay.
Very insightful.
Well, it's a totally different. We talked about discussing monarchy, and I think your response was kind of that's hilarious as a concept.
Well, it's just more just like it's so theoretical. It's hard for me to even imagine what it could look like in the United States. So
to be fair, same for me. It's a pure theoretical and philosophical mindset more than it is realistic. So I would agree with you there.
Yeah, not to say that there's like it. I just typically don't discuss things like that, personally. But I mean, yeah. But okay. Why? Well, okay. I'm just gonna say why monarchy over anything else, but I guess probably because you think that does help maximize good more than any other system. I'm guessing.
I think it maximizes. For me, it maximizes individual liberty, and that's for me as a libertarian. That's what matters.
Okay, I'll ask. I'll buy it. Why would monarchies maximize individual liberty more than?
The reason why I think so is because
down the rabbit hole we go.
Yeah, there's down the rabbit hole. The reason why I think that it maximizes individual liberty over democratic or republican systems is that under democratic and republican systems, you have this back and forth of one side or multiple sides. Whoever gets control of power, they hold control of power for a certain period of time. And one of the things that seems to be endemic when one side of a political disagreement holds power is that they abuse the other side. And right now we're seeing that. You could say it in any way. For example, I'm sure that I know that you lean further to the left. So I don't know what your opinion is on the abortion debate specifically, but I would have a guess. And I would
pro-choice, yeah, but yeah.
Well, I'm also I'm
You're pro-life at this point, Aiden.
Yeah, but I'm safe, legal, and rare, and I would call myself pro-life, but it's more because of I don't like the way it's been expanded. That being said, when these things go back and forth, basically what happens is that when the Democrats are let's just talk about the United States. When the Democrats are in power, they are able to enact, although again it's not working right now very much in this Roe v. Wade stuff. They're able to enact some of their beliefs on people who do not want them to be enacted upon them. And when the Republicans are in power, they're able to enact beliefs that Democrats do not want to be enacted upon them. This back and forth, psychologically, inevitably leads to what I can only describe as increased intergroup animosity, right? People hate each other because of this.
Can I, just because I know where we're headed with this, so I'm just going to ask one question and then you can incorporate this in your answer. Could this not exact same type of animosity occur in a monarchy where you've got some people that support the monarchy, some people that don't support the monarchy, and then people fight over that? Is that not possible?
Or even a specific dynasty?
Of course, it's possible. The difference is that when you have a monarchic system, this is, again, the works that I'm citing from here are going to be like Hayek and Erich von Kuhnert-Lenin, most specifically Erich von Kuhnert-Lenin, who I would highly suggest reading. His entire main book on this is available for free on the Mises Institute. Probably not your favorite, but if you'd like to read the book on understanding monarchy, Erich von Kuhnert-Lenin's book is inspirational, I believe.
Okay.
So the problem here, though, is that when you with democracy versus monarchy, with democracy systems, this change happens very, very quickly. And it's one side abusing the other side, and then the other side abusing back and forth. These are not, I think, good ways for society to function. I think it's unhealthy longitudinally for one side to be like, I'm going to abuse you, and the other side to go, no, now it's my chance to abuse you. I don't think that's healthy. Would you agree?
No. I would say that the natural tension that exists between peoples that is expressed through the government kind of ebbing and flowing back and forth is an okay thing.
Do you think that the Democrats and Republicans abuse each other back and forth, though?
Abuse each other?
Via legislation, yes.
I guess if you call trying to legislate things people disagree with abusive, sure.
That's how I see it, and I don't think that that's a good way for society to operate. Is basically
sure, but I mean, I could say that a monarchy is infinitely or theoretically infinitely abusive towards all of their subjects as well. No.
Why would a monarchy be why would a monarch be incentivized to abuse their subject?
Because they have in history. If you are citing historical examples with Republicans and Democrats, Jesus Christ.
Well, the answer would be because they're not beholden to their subjects. In democracy, you can, because there's no way to hold a monarch accountable short of violent revolution.
Yes, but how do you hold a democracy actually accountable outside of violent revolution if the democracy becomes incredibly corrupt?
Because we can vote people out.
But what if the democracy becomes corrupt? Which is a monarchy.
Then it turns into a monarchy or something, right? But I mean, in the United States, if we don't like people, we can vote them out, right?
If a democracy becomes corrupt, then what do you do? It's always time for guillotines, right?
Sure, but the time for guillotine in a monarchy comes way, way, way sooner than the time for guillotine in a democracy. Because in a monarchy, it's basically the only way to hold the monarch accountable is through killing people, right?
So I would agree, but I would suggest that actually, if we look at the history of humanity, that the time period that it takes for a monarchy to collapse into utter corruption is far longer than a democracy. Now, it's almost impossible for us to relate that historical time period to modern history, right? Because people did not have the freedom, they did not have the liberty that they have now to be able to make these kinds of decisions. So, however, what I think is that I do think it's possible that monarchy is a more preferable longitudinal situation or longitudinal answer.
Is there in the modern age, have we seen long-term stable monarchies? Do these even exist?
Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, Monaco.
Don't care. Tiny nations.
They're the richest nations on earth for the most
part. Oh, come on!
Because of their size. Also, hold on. If I go, do these places not have parliamentary systems at all?
They are parliamentary systems. Yes, they are.
Wait. So then, is the monarchy actually doing anything?
Arguable.
Well, okay, but like we wouldn't consider
Hang
the
on.
British system. Wait, hold on. The British system, we wouldn't consider that a monarchy, would we?
No, I would not.
Okay.
I want to be clear about something here.
Sure.
Through this entire debate, I wouldn't consider it a debate. I consider it a discussion.
Sure.
But I'm not trying to change your mind. I'm not trying to do anything weird here. I'm just having a
Just changing my mind, something weird.
No.
I understand what you're saying. I understand.
I thought this was just a pleasant discussion. So I often don't have extremely hard positions on some of this stuff. I am very pro-monarchy. But just because I'm very pro-monarchy doesn't mean that I think that it's an ideal system of government. And in fact, something I talk about very often is that there is no ideal system of government. So instead what we're doing, or from me trying to look into monarchy as a possible position, is to figure out how do we maximize individual liberty. Now, if you have a monarch who's in charge of the system, then you're not going to have these quick changes. For the most part, it can happen when the monarch dies, obviously, that are going to knock out people or beliefs that can be easily changed. And if you do such a thing, I think they can be violently overthrown. And that's always really, I think, one of the problems with democracy is that the fear of violent retaliation is gone, and it should not be.
Well, because we can still vote people out. Our democracy is still functioning. Like, why would?
Because I think having the option of violence need to be always present.
I mean, it's there. We still have guns, right?
Well, some states.
Wait, what state are you not allowed to own like rifles and shit? I'm pretty sure you can in every state in the United States.
Yes, rifles, but comparatively to the United States government's power, you know what I mean?
No, what do you mean? What do I mean?
Okay, comparatively to the power of the United States military, the average person, even if they've got a lot of weapons, is minimal.
I think if the United States people have learned one thing throughout all of human history, it's that a well-armed population is incredibly difficult to overcome.
I do
it's
agree.
not like so I mean, it's not like the United States government is going to beat the population because they've got a better military, which is true. But having every citizen armed, that's a pretty difficult thing for anybody to overcome, regardless of armaments. Otherwise, we would have stumped Vietnam, and we would have trashed Afghanistan and Iraq instantly. We wouldn't have been there for 20 years, right?
Precisely.
At Ukraine right now, the people are armed, and the Russian military can't do shit.
Well, the Russian military also seems like it sucks ass. But I mean, like,
I'm astonished at how seemingly completely just not qualified the Russian military is, or not prepared. That has shocked me a little bit.
I think it shocked everybody.
Yeah. Anywho, my monarchy situation monarchy position is just a complete personal opinion. It's mostly theoretical and philosophical. It's not practical in any way. So if people are like, if people are hearing that from your chat and are not happy, it is a theoretical and philosophical position, not a practical one. But again, I would highly recommend reading Erich von Kuhnert-Lenin's treatise on it. I think that it explains much of what I'm describing here of why a monarch might be, and I can explain it in further detail if necessary.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, anything else?
No, I think we've kind of come to a head here. I don't know if we've agreed on anything.
Probably not, but I mean, that's probably to be expected, right?
However, I did think it was, I learned things that I didn't know. So that was good for me. And I hope that because I know that I did give you some some new documents. Maybe not the Olga Bologomets one, but regardless, that you may not have been aware of. So I'm hoping it was mutually beneficial.
It was a fun conversation. Okay.
I think it was fun. How about that?
Sure. Okay.
And by the way, I really do appreciate you coming on and talking to me, because our last conversation was not productive at all. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, a long time ago. Yeah.
5 years ago, man. But I wanted to say that things don't last that long,
Yeah.
And I do really appreciate it, Destiny. It's been very nice to have you on.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate it. It's a fun conversation, even though we disagree on a lot.
It's fine.
But yeah, all right. Have fun. Stay safe.
Thanks for hanging out, and I'll talk to you later.
Yeah, have fun. I'll see you guys later. Bye.
Bye-bye.
So this was fun.
I hope it was fun. I hope it was fun. I get a feeling his chat was not happy with me, but that's all right. That's to be expected. Anywho, also, are we still live? Yeah. Masked men conveniently wearing police logos shot people with police property weapons that couldn't be recovered because of reasons, and there's no reason to doubt. So, anywho, how'd you guys feel about it? I thought it was fun.
Is Spoon alive even?
Huh?
Contribute?
I thought it was fun.
I think Spoon is dead.
He's been, just running stuff.
The chat I've been reading on Destiny's YouTube. People generally pretty open to the Ukraine discussion, but when the monarchy stuff started happening,
yeah,
people were, expressing basically my position of, is this a meme? And then when they learned it wasn't a meme, they're like, oh, okay, hilarious.
It's all good. Look, Destiny's audience is not going to accept me. That's fine. That's to be expected. Why would we ever expect anything else? But I think Destiny himself was actually really, really willing to talk, and I found that extremely I appreciated that.
Also, people are saying that in our chat that at least one person is a tier 3 sub of Destiny. So I guess there is some crossover there. So it's not really fair to paint the entirety of Destiny's audience as.
Oh, if you want to hear the conversation I had with Destiny, by the way, Gabriel, I was stoned out of my mind. I was high as fuck. I'd smoked a big ass bowl of weed. I was drunk, and I was on pole. And someone said, "No woman could like this. This guy's an incel who is like a leftoid." And I was like, "All right, I'll deal with it." And I was like, "I love Trump." It was really bad. If you want to listen to it, it's extremely embarrassing. But I was drunk and high, and it was 5 years ago. So, if you want to hold that against me, fine. I can't tell you what not to do. Speaking of which, though, I am gonna eat a little bit of this. What? Yeah. I was actually really, I'm really, really thankful for Steve for coming on. Let me send him a private message. That was very nice of him. I don't know. Did you guys enjoy the stream?
I enjoyed yelling at people. As opposed to yelling at my screen.
Where did our fucking talk on Twitter go?
Also, people seem to be agreeing with me, saying that yelling at people is fun. Which is based.
I don't think yelling at people is fun.
Hmm.
Twitter's fucking up with me.
Oh.
Kind of lame.
There's fun yelling at people. Like, I don't know, when you're arguing over soccer or something.
Sure. Oh, there it is. Oh, right.
Also, people are asking to let them be heard.
Okay.
Do you want that on the stream, or are we just wrapping up the stream and moving into...
No, let's have people on for the sort of post-debate discussion. I will say I'm going to go use the restroom real quick. I'll be right back. So... how are we still doing it? Are we still doing it through the Zoom thing?
Doing what?
What are we doing this through? Oh, it's all through Discord, right. Right. I'll be right back.
Fascinating. Hello, Kiza. So, Rat King is asking in Discord podcast live chat to be unmuted, which is fine with me, except I don't think this should be going into the YouTube recording. And Aiden didn't give me permission. Oh. So yeah, once the show is over, I will move everyone over to a voice channel where you can speak. Why don't you want me to explain what monarchy is bad, Brad? Why not? As a person who lives in a monarchy effectively, I feel like I'm pretty qualified on shitting on it. The biggest problem with the Destiny, I presume, is that he uses debate tactics like belittling instead of answering and strawmanning your intentions and demanding you explain yourself as if it was yours.
I don't think he did that to me today.
Oh man, he was.
Well, people in our YouTube chat are saying it, so.
Well, possibly. I didn't get that impression.
I would say Spoon. If you're still here, could you end the stream? Still live on YouTube.
I thought Destiny was actually quite pleasant to talk to. So.
I did expose his sheer ignorance.